Good evening. I'd like to welcome all of you to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Wilmette Plan Commission. Mr. Adler, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bailey?
Present.
Ms. Gamey?
Here.
Mr. Head?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Mr. Schwab? Ms. Norick? Chairman Urban?
Here. For those of you who are new to our proceedings, the purpose of this commission is to review proposed plats of subdivision and consolidation, planned unit development, special uses, and zoning and comprehensive plan amendments. Because the commission will be hearing a planned unit development tonight, staff has prepared a PowerPoint about the PUD process. Mr. Adler, would you please proceed with the PowerPoint?
Sure. And I'll try to get through this relatively quickly. The PUD process is a regulatory process that allows more flexibility in the development of land than the typical zoning process. The Plan Unit Development process combines the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Plan Commission, and the Appearance Review Commission processes into one process. A PUD is heard by the Plan Commission as a special use with the final approval resting with the Village Board. The Plan Commission is a recommending body to the Village Board and does not make binding decisions. The zoning relief in a PUD typically requires some form of public benefit to be provided. The applicant is charged with deciding whether they want to go through the plan unit development process. The plan unit development process is not dictated by the village. Again, it's up to the applicant to determine whether they want to go through that process. The entire process could be found in Chapter 6 of the Village Wilmette Zoning Ordinance. Up on the screen is the purpose section of the PUD process, allowing flexibility in development, diversification of location of structures, creative approach to the use of land, the efficient use of land to facilitate a more effective arrangement of land uses, creation of open space, encourage the construction of appropriate amenities that will enhance the character of the site, guarantee quality construction commensurate with other developments within the community, and provide an application procedure that is sensitive to the needs for the development review. The process is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is the pre-application phase. That's when the materials are submitted, and that's a meeting typically with staff. The second phase is the preliminary approval phase. That's where we're at tonight. This is the first meeting with the Plan Commission on this particular application. And then, as mentioned earlier, the recommendation from the Plan Commission goes to the Village Board. And then the final approval phase rests with the Village Board. During the preliminary approval, the Plan Commission will receive the presentation from the applicant to begin with. They'll take public testimony, and they're going to deliberate and formulate a recommendation to the Village Board. The Village Board will also receive a presentation from the applicant and take public testimony. What is considered a public benefit? As mentioned, to get zoning relief, an applicant's supposed to show that there's substantial benefit to the village to get that relief. On the screen is a number of items. This is a guide. It's not an exclusive list, but it includes community amenities, preservation of historically significant structures, the adaptive reuse of buildings, preservation of environmental features, public open space and recreational amenities, innovative stormwater management, additional public infrastructure improvements, affordable or senior housing set-asides, the provision of accessible dwelling units, and the creation of a building that is LEED or LEED equivalent. A little bit more detail about the Plan Committee process tonight. As mentioned, the Plan Commission is going to receive the testimony from the applicant regarding the petition. The applicant is allowed to present without interruption. We've been told by the applicant that the presentation should take 30 to 45 minutes. The Plan Commission members will ask questions of the applicant. When the applicant has completed their presentation, the chair will ask if any members of the public have desire to speak on the application. All residents wishing to address the commission will be given the opportunity. They may ask questions, the Plan Commission may ask questions of interested parties. After all interested parties have addressed the Plan Commission, the chair provides the applicant with an opportunity to comment on the public testimony or answer questions that were asked. The Plan Commission then may have follow-up questions for the applicant. After everybody has addressed the Plan Commission, the chair will close the public testimony and request a member to make a motion. Just understand the motion is given in positive form as a motion to approve the request. Having the motion made and seconded allows the Plan Commission to begin discussion and debate. The Plan Commission members will discuss the testimony given and evidence gathered. When the Plan Commission has completed discussion, the chair will ask that a vote be taken on the motion. Because the vote is made in the positive, a vote in favor of the motion is a vote in favor of the request. I have up here on the screen, if the meeting gets past 10 o'clock or around 10 o'clock and it looks like there's a lot more public that's requesting to speak, or it doesn't look like the meeting's going to wrap up in a timely manner, the chair may ask that the application to be continued. We have discussed March 22nd is a possible day and April 3rd is a possible day. We will, if it gets to that point where the meeting is continued, we will continue it to a date certain. We have to have a discussion with the applicant on which date that would be to. If there's a resident who doesn't think that they would be able to make a March 22nd or April 3rd meeting, we would ask that you let us know, because we would like to get your testimony in tonight if possible. It's important to remember that the Plan Commission is a recommending body. They're not authorized to take the final action on the application. And please keep in mind that we are a community of neighbors, and ask that all questions and comments be directed to the chair, and that we all be respectful to all parties.
So while what I'm about to say is true for every application, for every applicant that comes to the village, there are additional laws that come into place when we're talking about affordable housing. The federal laws, the Fair Housing Act, our state laws, and including our own village ordinances apply. Therefore, any commentary about the actual or perceived status, practice, or expression of the potential users or the potential tenant's race, color, religion, age, national origin, ancestry, sex, age, disability, sexual orientation, marital status, parental status, military discharge status, source of income, or housing status, or the actual perceived association with such a person will not be considered by the Plan Commission in making its decision for a recommended approval or a non-approval tonight in the application. That's not to say you can't make your comments. You have a First Amendment right to do so, but just know that they will fall on deaf ears upon this Plan Commission, and I will admonish continually throughout the hearing if needed.
Thank you. As Mr. Adler said, based upon the discussion tonight, the Plan Commission will make a recommendation to the Village Board of Trustees to approve the request. Our recommendation to the board is advisory only. The Village Board has final say on all applications and will make its own determination as to whether to grant or deny them. The Village Board is not legally bound by our recommendations. Because we're a fact-finding body, I ask that everyone who plans to address the board tonight raise your right hand and be sworn in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Mr. Adler, will you please call our first and only case of the evening?
The first and only case is case 2018 P1. It's a request for approval of a plan unit development preliminary plan and special use to permit the construction of a multifamily building containing approximately 16 affordable rental units in the NR Neighborhood Retail Zoning District on the property at 1925 Wilmette Avenue.
This is for the applicant as well as for anyone who speaks tonight. If you would do me the favor of introducing yourself before beginning your remarks. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hal Frank. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Melcher, Pertil, and Stell. My office is at 1515 East Woodfield Road in Schaumburg. I am pleased to be before you this evening on behalf of Housing Opportunity Development Corporation. And as all of you just did, I would like to make some preliminary comments before our actual presentation begins. First, I would like to thank Mr. Adler, the village staff, for putting together what is probably one of the most extensive agenda packets I've ever seen. But I guess that's what happens when you're on your third go-around and the project goes on for well over a year. I also would like to thank you for providing that summary of the process that brings us here this evening. There was one thing I wanted to add, which right at the end of your opening remarks, Madam Chairman, you hit on, took away a little bit of my thunder, which is the reference to the fact that, as you all know, you are fact-finding bodies. Our goal this evening in helping you come to the point of making that recommendation that you're obligated under your ordinance to do is to present you with the facts that and the opinions which are based on fact that will help you come to the conclusion that the standards for the planned unit development relief that is being sought and the special use approval that is being sought have been met, have been satisfied. As Corporation Counsel just said, that doesn't mean that opinions can't be freely expressed. But again, I know that you will, and I encourage you to ultimately base your recommendation, as the law contemplates, on the facts that are set before you. Because we know that there are a lot of people that want to speak this evening, and we don't want to create one of those public hearings where the residents sit for an hour or 2 hours before they have the ability to speak. We have indicated to village staff, as Mr. Adler just indicated, that we are going to try to keep our presentation because much of it has been heard before, and a lot of it is in the written materials which have both been delivered to the village and been available for a long time, posted on the village's excellent website. We're not going to take the opportunity to run through all the things that have already been made of record. Specifically, we have presented facts through our plans, our studies, our reports that we believe established that the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan will be achieved by this proposal, that the proposal is compatible with surrounding land uses, that there is a market demand for what is being proposed, that the project as designed will not only have a first-class design but have adequate parking, that there will be minimal impact on neighborhood traffic because of the nature of the development, and that there will be compliance with the engineering requirements of the village code, and in fact an opportunity to make things better in terms of stormwater management. Because all of those facts do need to be established, I am making reference to them now in those plans and studies and reports that I just made reference to, and we would ask, with your indulgence, to incorporate all of those into the hearing record this evening, again, so that we don't have to go through them again one more time. Having said that, I want to note for the record that our full complement of consultants is here in the first row. We have our first-class architect and traffic consultant, also first class, and our marketing consultant, our appraiser who did prepare a property impact analysis, and also our civil engineer is here. So everybody's here to answer any questions. Answer any questions that you may have. but there's only one of those consultants that we are going to have that I've asked to address this evening after Mr. Koenig, and that is Mr. Satter, who prepared the impact on surrounding property reports. So also, I'd like to note for the record, because we're not going to do it as part of this public hearing, that the applicant has responded to all the staff's site plan comments and requests for comments or conditions and clarifications. Those have also been responded to by our client. They are in the record, so we are not going to also reiterate all of those. Take the time to do that this evening. With that foundation, I would like to turn the floor over to Richard Koenig, who is the Executive Director of HODC. I've asked Richard to provide all of you and the members of the audience with a brief summary of where he started, where we started, and where we've come from, what has happened over this last period of time, how the plan has evolved, how it's changed, how it's improved, how it's responded to previously expressed concerns, and basically answer then any questions that you might have. Richard?
Thank you. Good evening. Again, my name is Richard Koenig. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Opportunity Development Corporation. I've been the Executive Director since 1997. HODC, as I will refer to us, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, actually founded in Wilmette in 1983. Our mission is to develop affordable housing throughout the northern suburbs. As you might guess, there aren't a lot of other organizations doing this work in this area, and we are, if you're looking for your local nonprofit affordable housing developer, that's us. We have a track record of having developed over 300 units and over 22 projects throughout the northern suburbs. We've located properties and developed properties in a number of suburbs and currently manage 255 units in 8 different suburban communities. We have an excellent board of directors and staff that operate the organization. We have 12 staff members and 12 board of directors. Most of them are here with us tonight. I'd like the board and staff to raise their hands or stand up or wave. This is our hardworking board and staff to keep the organization together, that give me guidance and are successfully able to help us pull the organization together, help us put the developments together, and also manage all of our properties. I thank them for all coming out tonight as a show of support for the organization. The project we're proposing is called Cleland Place, after a longtime Wilmette resident, Gene and Bob Cleland. Gene was one of our founding board members on our board for a long time. The proposal is for 16 new rental units of 1 and 2 bedrooms, targeting Wilmette residents, workers, and families, but again, targeted to lower income residents. We will have set aside for veterans and people with disabilities, and the project overall addresses a need that's identified in the Wilmette's housing plan, as well as the Affordable Housing Planning and Appeal Act, which says all communities should have an affordable housing located within their community. We originally presented in November of 2015 a proposal. The proposal was for a larger number of units, and since that time we've been very active in trying to improve the proposal based on the recommendations and the comments provided. We held a series of 6 community meetings over the past 2 years where we gained input from the community and tried as hard as we could to comprehensively address all of the recommendations that people made. We've explored numerous potential development options, other things that we could do, other ways that we could develop the site to try and make it better, to try and improve the development, to try and make it a long-term asset for the community. The building, the former American Legion site, although we purchased the building a number of years ago, it's not sat vacant. Actually, the Actors Training Center of the Wilmette Theater has been active using the building, training students. They had classes there, and we're very active in the building for about just over a year. We also were able to allow a fledgling nonprofit called Uncorked Adventures have a fundraiser for Parkinson's disease. A gentleman from Wilmette walked across the country and was able to raise funds, and we were able to let them use that building to have their kickoff fundraiser before his walk started. Another major thing that happened that has impacted our ability to move forward is the Willridge Plaza redevelopment. We had been working with the previous owner to try and work with them to do some cross easements to try and allow them to access our site and we could access their site. And when the new development came forward, all those discussions and comments and hard work putting that together fell by the wayside because that new development was not able to incorporate some of our requests. So We did put our proposal on hold while that project went through the development process. Came before the Planning Commission, went before the Village Board, and was ultimately approved. And now that that's gone forward, it's very clear in what's happening on that site. Now we feel that it's time to move forward and present what it is that we're interested in trying to do. In listening to what the community has said, we've not been able to answer every single response. We've not been able to meet everybody's needs. We can't please everybody all the time, but we have taken a number of steps, I think, to make the project a lot better and really respond to what the input was. We've reduced the unit count by 20%. There was a desire to include family units, so we have changed, and we now have a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units as requested by the community. We increased the size of the community room so that we could have additional gatherings within the building, and increase the size of the office space so it's actually a little bit bigger footprint so that we can accommodate that. We've increased and improved the parking ratio by 25%. So that the unit mix, so that there still are more than 1 parking space for every unit in the building, 20 parking spaces for the 16 units. We've shared our tenant selection plan and our process for how tenants are selected, so we're clear on who is selected, how they're selected, what that process is, who's not selected, and just overall what that process looks like. It can be very complicated and confusing for some people not familiar with how that goes. We were able to change the parking configuration. We had at some point been talking with the Wheel Ridge Plaza about doing some sharing parking. Our residents are gone at work during the day, and there's parking available at Wheel Ridge at night when the plaza would have been open. Obviously, that's gone away, and we had to step back and weren't able to take advantage of those additional parking spaces. We got a list of engineering questions from the village, which we recently replied to, and are able to make a lot of improvements requested by the village. We're able to improve the stormwater runoff, and that's been a large issue being addressed by the council, and have been able to make a significant reduction in the amount of runoff from the site. So really feel that we've been able to address those issues raised by the village engineering staff. One of the more difficult issues raised by some members of the community was the property management done by HODC. We've tried to explain how we manage our property, some of the issues that have been raised regarding one building in particular. Although I mentioned we manage a number of sites and a number of communities, there's especially one building, a couple of smaller buildings that have been raised as really issues that have really frightened some people and have really caused pause for people to us being able to manage the property. Been tried to explain and let the community know how we have been able to improve our property management systems, hire property management staff that are more extensively involved in the management of the building, and really when we originally took over the building, it was already a very troubled building. We were a very small nonprofit staff trying to take on a big project in the community, and have been doing the best that we could to try and improve that. But what we really realized over time is that we need full-time management staff. We now have 8 of our 12 staff people are just doing property management. We were able to bring on an asset management director. Our asset management director, Rose Russo, who's here this evening. Actually, one thing I wanted to brag about to the council tonight, to the commission tonight, the Illinois Housing Development Authority is the agency that provides most of the funding for affordable housing in the state. And last week, Rose won IDA's Property Manager of the Year. So, thank you. So by removing me from the property management decisions, putting Rose in charge, I think it's made a significant difference in our ability to manage these properties more effectively. It's only the second time IDA has given out that award, and Rose, we were very excited that Rose won that award from the state, and it was announced at the Governor's Housing Conference last week. So I think shows that we have continued to try and improve our processes as we grow as an organization. We have someone who's in charge who's able to do a much better job of managing and address the tenant issues much more quickly, and really make us a much more effective overall organization, and that's really because of her. We continue to keep, although there were some things that we changed to try and make the building better, we've retained a lot of benefits that we had originally proposed. We continue to be focused on trying to provide units for Wilmette residents, and that's really our core, is trying to make sure that Wilmette residents get priority whenever possible for the units. The property will pay real estate taxes, and that will continue to be the case. We are not requesting any village funding of any kind. The funding will come from other state and federal agencies. The building is fully handicap accessible. It does have an elevator. It is fully accessible. It's ADA compliant, as well as having universal design features that allow visitability to every single unit within the building. We had committed to setting aside some units when we purchased the building from the American Legion to set aside units for veterans. And really, I think that's helped us be able to purchase the building. I think they were excited about the ability to continue that legacy that the Legion had set forth, to try and set aside some units that would just be saved for veterans. There is a need in the community for affordable housing, as shown in our market study, and also through the Village's Affordable Housing Plan. And the building will continue to be built of quality construction. We have a laundry room on site, a property management office on site. There have been some questions raised about financial feasibility of the building. Reserves are set aside up front and also ongoing, so the building can continue to operate and be functioning for the long term, because our goal is to really curate a long-term community asset. There's going to be less impervious surface, and the property will be green certified. So as staff mentioned earlier, there are certain community benefits that need to be shown by a project before it moves forward. One of those is actually providing affordable housing. That's on the Village's list of things that provide a benefit for the community. Obviously, this does that. We'll improve stormwater management by providing a bioswale that will clean water running off the site and clean that and prevent any flooding. But also, one of the big issues raised was the stormwater runoff. And our engineers estimated that during a major storm, the facilities built within the property will reduce stormwater runoff during a major storm by 94%. So we'll retain the water, make sure it doesn't run off the site, and we'll create that much less running off into the stormwater system. Again, I mentioned universal design features, but also this will be certified by Enterprise Green Communities, which is basically, it's a type of a LEED certification. It doesn't cost as much as LEED certification. It is something equivalent to LEED Silver status, and that's something we've obtained on our other buildings and will retain for this property. We meet all of the community PUD standards, and all the reports, all the studies that we submitted show that it does meet all those standards. But one we did want to address this evening was regarding local property values. We wanted to invite John Satter, who did a study, to very briefly explain to you how it meets those community standards.
Madam Commission, Urban and Commission members, my name is John Satter. I live at 330 Old Green Bay Road in Glencoe, Illinois. I work for Hilco Global in Northbrook, Illinois, as the Managing Director of the Midwest region. Okay. You mean hit the reset button? Too tall.
Oh.
No, don't break it.
And strong. All right. I'll lean in. Madam Urban and committee members, good evening. My name is John Satter. I reside at 330 Old Green Bay Road in Glencoe, Illinois, and I work for Hilco Global in Northbrook as the managing director and regional manager of a real estate appraisal unit. I've been with Hilco for the last 6 years, and prior to that, I ran my practice here in Wilmette for 15 years out of the Baker building. John, is there a hand mic maybe we can try to use?
You
or
could try,
what should
but
do?
I would maybe
Lean into it.
not as good posture.
Really get in
yeah,
there?
I hate to say
Really
it.
get into the mic?
Yeah.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Yeah, I'll see if the...
Anything under the sun here. Let me just push this out.
Oh.
You can stand up.
There we go. Perfect. No, I'll hold it. I can hold it. Thank you. Okay, very good. All right.
You can't...
Thank you.
That's going to unplug it if you do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll continue leaning in. All right. So prior to joining Hilco, for 15 years I ran my business out of the Baker building in Wilmette. I was part of your housing, your ad hoc business advisory group. Worked with John and the village board at the time when you were looking at the downtown plan and getting together the market study that Valerie Kretschmer ended up doing. And during my time in Wilmette here for 15 years, I think I appraised roughly over 1,000 properties in Wilmette. I currently am serving on the Glencoe Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and am also on the very less active Glencoe Plan Commission. I have experience appraising low-income housing properties, tax credit properties similar to what's being proposed tonight. And my CV is attached to my report, which you have a copy of, along with an addendum with some supporting information. I was retained by the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation to offer an opinion regarding what influence, if any, the proposed Cleveland project as currently planned will have on surrounding property values. In the course of completing that assignment, we inspected the property several times. We reviewed the information that's been presented as part of the application, including the architectural plans, the engineering plans, the CLOA parking evaluation. We read through the follow-up responses, reviewed the village comprehensive plan, and the general standards and development standards and exception standards. As part of the appraisal analysis, we inspected we inspected the development patterns and land use in the zoning districts in proximity to the Cleveland property location, and we reviewed sale price data and rental price data for properties that are in proximity to low-income projects and compared those to properties that are not in proximity. The Wilmette 2000 Comprehensive Plan identifies two continuing housing issues in Wilmette: the availability of decent, safe, and reasonably affordable housing for elderly and the low and moderate income households, and whether an appropriate range of housing options is available to the village's senior citizens. The proposed Cleveland Place development is intended to house low-income residents. To measure the effect, if any, that a low-income property has on the surrounding properties, we identified 10 low-income properties in the North Shore communities of Evanston, Skokie, Highland Park, and Deerfield. A summary of the 10 properties is presented in the addendum section of our report. We completed exterior inspections of the 6 low-income senior and 4 low-income family income properties, and noticed that all the properties were in average to good condition, the sites were clean and well-maintained, and the buildings conformed to the local inventory. We then researched and analyzed sale prices of single-unit residential properties in the immediate vicinity of the 10 low-income properties, and compared them to to the sale prices of properties that are not directly exposed or located at least 1 block from the low-income properties. A relative comparison analysis for each location has been summarized in the addendum section of the report and provides a side-by-side comparison of properties located adjacent or across the street from the low-income properties that sold with similar type, design, and size properties located over 1 block from or not directly exposed to the low-income properties. And I note that the 1 block location metric is a distance used in market studies when measuring external factors such as noise or view impairments as a reasonable distance to diminish the effect. Our analysis concluded that there was no significant market rejection or significant variance in the price, sale price, or rental price, or an extended marketing period attributed to a property being located in direct proximity to a low-income property. The Cleveland development is seeking a height variance, and while the building height is conforming to the zoning ordinance at 30 feet, the proposed development seeks an increase in height to 2.5 to 3 stories. During our inspection of the local area, we noticed and witnessed 5 multi-unit 3 to 4 story buildings located along Ridge that are in proximity to the Pin Oak and High Point townhouse projects. The proposed Cleveland Place building is smaller in three-story height, is similar in three-story height, design and appearance, but significantly smaller in scale than the Ridge Road projects. We've reviewed market sales of the individual townhomes in the Pin Oak and High Point townhouse projects and see no evidence that proximity to the 3- or 4-story multi-unit residential properties results in an obvious rejection of the property, a stigma, an elongated marketing period, or significantly lower prices. We also note that the proposed Cleveland Place is significantly smaller in building height and scale compared to the recently approved 64-unit Artis senior living development. In conclusion, we are of the opinion that development of the subject property site with a proposed multi-unit residential project under the planned unit development general standards and in accordance with the NR Neighborhood Retail Business District Zoning Code will not substantially diminish the market value of the surrounding properties, and it will not cause a substantial impairment of the use of those properties. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation for this evening. We welcome your comments and questions.
Do any members of the Plan Commission have questions for Mr. Koenig or other members of his team? Mr. Koenig, you said that HODC has been in existence since 1983 and that it was created here in Wilmette. Can you tell us a little bit about how it was created and what spurred its creation?
Sure. So we really trace our roots back to the fair housing movement. Dr. Martin Luther King spoke on the Winnetka Village Green in 1967 and created an organization that became the Interfaith Housing Center of the Northern Suburbs, which is really the fair housing organization for the northern suburbs. It was a group of congregations that got together and decided to push for fair housing. As a spinoff, after telling everybody else what to do, how to create fair housing, they decided to do a spinoff organization that became the Interfaith Housing Development Corporation. And those two organizations grew up together, one doing fair housing work and an organization doing development work. So that's really what the core was. Those organizations came up together and they decided to fully split and separate operations in 1997 when I was hired as the first full-time executive director of just the Development Corporation. We subsequently changed our name to Housing Opportunity Development Corporation.
Thank you.
Question. In reviewing some of the comments that we received on the development, one consistent theme was questions regarding the traffic impact. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Would you like my traffic engineer to speak to that? I know
Yeah, that probably
the
makes
summary
sense.
was there was a 1-second difference in traffic, so if we want to have our consultant come up and talk to that, I'm happy to.
Could you do that?
Good evening. My name is Eric Russell. I'm a principal at KLOA, Traffic Engineers. We actually performed the parking study for the project. The village's engineer actually did the traffic study, but I'll speak just a little bit about what the findings for that study were. They found that the traffic impact was very low just based on the types of tenants that would be in the units, the low ownership of vehicles by typical tenants in this type of development, and consequently translating to a low traffic generation. I think the numbers, they use some very conservative assumptions as though all of the tenants would be driving, but with the caveat, understanding that typically will not be the case in this type of building. They showed that the intersection of Ridge and Wilmette would operate with a very minimal increase in delay. I think it was less than 1 second on average per vehicle. And the intersection is currently operating at an acceptable level of service C today, and will continue at that same level of service in the future. So they found that there was very minimal impact on the traffic on Wilmette or through the intersection as related to the traffic generation from the project.
Thank you.
Please.
I have a question for Mr. Sattler. Your appraisal, I presume you're talking about the appraisal dated January 10th, 2018, which is in our package. So you say it won't substantially diminish the values of the neighboring properties. Can you assign any number to what you mean by substantially, or a range of numbers?
I think that it would be less than 5%.
Is that what your report means?
I think that the standard is that language is that it would substantially diminish, it would not substantially diminish the property values, but really the metrics, and if you look at all the relative comparisons for the 10 property locations, it appears that there's really no impact. That there are cases where the properties near the lower income housing development are slightly higher than a very, very similar property 2 blocks away, a very substitutable property, all things being generally equal.
So could your report say that, or is
well,
that
I think
your
that the
opinion?
data is a little bit mixed, so maybe there's one that, a few that's higher, a few that are maybe lower, but the variances are all very, very minor. So,
I mean, I don't mean to be argumentative, but in my business, substantially can mean, 3% or 30%, It really doesn't mean anything to say substantially.
substantially is, I think, just the language is for the general, as part of the
Right. So your report didn't assign
it's in the
any
code.
number to what's.
Is the word used in the code? Your code.
Yeah.
So if I was to tally it all up, I would say that.
Well, do we have a view of what it means in our code?
I'm sorry, Mr. Bailey, we do not have a definition of what substantially means in our code. Substantially means substantially, so it's not something that we would define in the
that
code.
doesn't mean, I mean, really, with all due respect, it doesn't mean anything unless you assign some range of numbers to it.
Sir, there are other people. When you'll get your chance to speak. Please do not blurt out. Please do not speak. We have a meeting that needs to be run efficiently, and we have people at the podium. I promise you'll get your chance to speak.
So my opinion is that it would be less than 5%.
Great. Thank you.
I do have one question. You mentioned that, I don't remember the number, but you hired, I think Hal mentioned that you hired new managers, full-time staff. I think you said maybe 8. Is that correct?
So currently we have 12 staff, and 8 of those are involved with property management.
Where are they located? And how many properties do each one manage? Does each one manage?
Right. So we have 2 of the staff are located at one building. 3 of the staff are located at one building in Deerfield. 3 of the staff people operate out of our main office in Techney. That's the property management staff, and circulate among about, they have, it's about a dozen buildings with about just over 100 units. And then we have 2 maintenance personnel who are out in the community all the time. They don't typically end up in the office. They're busy out dealing with the buildings, and so they're circulating throughout the community, throughout our buildings.
Okay, so 3 out of Techney, 3 out of Deerfield, and 2 maintenance staff. They're not property managers.
They're rotating around.
Okay, so you really have 6 maintenance, 6 property managers. So where would the property manager for this property be?
The property manager for this would operate out of our office in Techney.
Which each one is already doing about 100 units.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
How long has the property management staff been on board, on staff?
Rose, our asset management director, has been with us for just over about 3 years. Our current property manager has been with us, who would probably be with this building, has been around for 2 years. Our maintenance staff have been with us for a couple of years. The folks that are up at the Deerfield building have been there for more than 15 years.
Thank you.
So our average staff has been with us for about 8 years now, but I sort of skew that by being with the organization for almost 20 years.
And do you assume these responsibilities pursuant to management contract, or just by virtue of being the owner?
So we manage the properties that we manage. Most of them are properties that we have developed ourselves, that we own ourselves. Some are properties that we developed but don't own. We develop them on behalf of somebody else. But we also do manage third-party properties that we didn't have any involvement at all with the development, just do the property management.
But this one,
So
you're
this
going to
one-
manage as the owner?
Own and manage, correct.
So it's not a management contract of limited term. You're in it in the long run?
Correct.
Yeah.
We sign an agreement with ourselves. I sign on both lines.
Yeah.
Richard, would you imagine that you would add an additional management staff when this project comes online, if it were to be approved?
Yes, Jeff. That's our goal is to add an additional property manager as we continue to grow. We have several other properties in the pipeline. We were recently approved by IDA for 2 additional properties, and so as we add additional properties, we're going to add additional property management staff, and this would be one that we would definitely add, show that we need to add more staff. We're continuing to grow.
I have a couple more questions. Can you describe the range of the units in terms of the size of the units, the number of bedrooms out of the 16 units?
Sure. So it is 10 one-bedrooms that are about 535 square feet,
Okay.
and 6 two-bedrooms that are, I think it's 715 square feet for those units.
And can you say a little bit about the targeted occupancy, who would be living in these units?
Right. So the general for qualification, sort of the baseline that we use, in addition to trying to target and do outreach as much as possible to attract Wilmette residents, there's an income threshold, and that's based on the financing that we're able to secure. And so any tenant household, the total gross household income would have to be less than 60% of the area median income. For a 2-person household, that's somewhere around $37,000 per year. For a 3-person household, it's, I think, $42,000 per year. So that's sort of beyond that threshold, they have to income qualify. So there's a maximum amount of money that they'd be able to earn. On the bottom side, they'd have to earn enough income to be able to afford the rent. They're proposing the rents to be $615 for the 1-bedrooms and $800 for the 2-bedrooms. So it's not to overly burden a household based on paying too much of their income towards rent. They'd have to the general rule of thumb is about 30% of their income towards rent, so we'd want them to be able to comfortably be able to afford to pay those rents, but that's not a strict rule on the bottom side.
Thank you.
Has HODC retained ownership of all of the units it's developed, or has it sold some off? And if you have sold some off, what informed the decision to do so?
We've never sold off any properties that we developed. We have developed on behalf of others, so there was no plan to continue to hold on to ownership. It's our goal is to hold and maintain all of our properties forever. Mm-hmm. We don't have any intention or any plans of selling off any of our properties. They all come with a minimum 30-year compliance period, and when that compliance period is up, we're going to continue. Our goal is to continue to hold and own those. We don't have any plans to sell anything right now.
Continue to hold them as affordable housing.
Correct, as affordable housing forever, yeah, for the long term. That's really our goal as a mission-driven organization.
You said earlier that HODC would be paying property taxes on the property. You are a not-for-profit, but you're still required to pay property taxes?
That's correct. So the property would be held in a single-purpose entity that would be set up as a limited partnership to hold and own the project. We would be in charge. We would be the managing partner of that partnership, but that property is it's a for-profit entity. Therefore, is required to pay real estate taxes. Although we are a charitable organization, because we enforce people paying their rents and will evict people if they don't pay their rent, that's considered by the state as not acting charitably. Mm-hmm. And so we are not able to waive real estate taxes for that property, so all our properties do end up paying real estate taxes.
And you get no tax break or do you?
So the taxes are based on the value of the property because our rents are lower than market, hence
Gotcha.
Definition of affordable housing. The valuation of the property is based on the value, and that value is restricted through covenants and regulatory agreements. There's a lot of legal agreements in place that restrict that value. And so the real estate taxes are based on the value of the property, and that value is restricted.
Thank you. Any other questions from commission members? There are members of the public who would like to speak. What I would ask is people form a line and be orderly in making their statements. I would ask that people think about what's most salient about what they want to say. There is a lot of interest in speaking this evening. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, just one question before. We received this binder at our houses last night from delivered by the Plan Commission, and it's a large amount of work that somebody prepared, but it's not signed by anybody. There's an organization called Wilmette Residents United for Transparency and Informed Decisions on American Legion Post 46 redevelopment. I just ask that if you prepared this or if you're part of the organization, identify yourself because it's unsigned by any individuals.
Yeah. So please.
I'm one member of the group who was involved in the preparation of the package.
Great. Thank you. If each speaker would introduce themselves before making their remarks, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
All set?
Yes.
My name is Alan Minoff. I've lived in Wilmette for 24 years. I raised my family here. I live a few blocks west of the proposed development just off Wilmette Avenue. And I urge the Commission to deny the variance and not work with this developer. The appearance means the property will be considered a substandard property the day it's completed. Architectural aesthetics are in the eye of the beholder, but there's no way to describe this design as anything but cheap and ugly. It'll be an eyesore on the busiest route to the village center. The building over parking lot design, which is proposed, has been phased out almost everywhere for both its looks and over safety issues. The project is not in keeping with Wilmette's character as a village of privately owned, mostly single-family homes. An argument can be made that diversity is a goal for Wilmette. And my cul-de-sac, if you come to our block party every year, and the village as a whole are examples of diversity in race, sex, national origin, age, and sexual preference. What the residents in the cul-de-sac have in common is the ability to afford purchasing and maintaining their property. In the United States, property rights are based on what you can afford. Just wanting something doesn't mean you get to have it. What is the benefit to the village of Wilmette in giving 20 lucky and/or politically chosen housing lottery winners the privilege of living in Wilmette? Ours is one of the most desirable communities in all the Chicago metropolitan area. There are many less expensive communities in which 20 units of cheap housing could be built. I love the impact analysis. When it was a negligible difference, they said in their own materials will not substantially diminish the market value of surrounding properties, and it will not cause a substantial impairment of the use of those properties. I feel very sorry for the people who would live nearby and they just found out if they have a $500,000 house, well, now it's $25,000 worth 5%. The architect, these guys just took it out of their pockets. Thank you very much. That's pretty substantial to me. It says the materials say the units are not suitable for children. Or they used, some of the materials said. It's not clear how that would work in practice. If the occupant of a one-bedroom were to have a child or invite someone to live there with a child, would they be evicted? I don't think so. Or if an occupant were to have one or even two children after moving in, what would prevent the adults from sleeping in the bedroom and the children in the living room? Once someone in the income bracket mentioned them in the materials has scored a unit in the development, why would they ever leave? I mean, living in Wilmette is fantastic, as we all know. It also says, finally, and I'm almost done, the materials say the residents are less likely to have cars. Living in this development without a car is impractical. If you want to go grocery shopping, you have to wait for the 421 bus. Oh, that only runs in the morning and the evening on rush hours. It's a very long walk to the nearest supermarket on Green Bay Road, and you can't do it in the winter. So this development requires variances. I would like you to encourage us not to approve those variances. Wilmette can do much better than this project. Thank you for your attention.
I'd like to ask two favors of everyone here tonight. The first is hold the applause. We're here discussing a very important issue in the community. If you feel the need to support a speaker, please get up and follow and say that you agree with the speaker. A second point I would like to ask of everyone here is to discuss this issue in a civil tone. I don't think there's anything to be gained by disparaging future residents of Wilmette, possibly, who we don't even know. We're, in some cases, casting aspersion on people without even putting our hand out and saying, hello, how are you, who are you? So I'm asking more than anything for a civil tone this evening. Thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Lisa Berganza. I am a resident living very close to this development. And I'm very excited about the fact that, that I live in a community that's welcoming to people with disabilities, to low-income folks who might not be able to afford to live close to their family members. I've had low-income a grandparent who was able to live close to my children growing up. I have a son with autism who could potentially be a resident of this building, and I know a number of other parents who have children who grow up in this community. This is a wonderful community. We have fabulous schools. We have a great library. We have wonderful employers. We have a park district that is so supportive. We have a police department and a fire department that understands how to make accommodations for people with disabilities. But when our children grow up and they're it's no longer appropriate to have them living under our roofs, they have to leave because they can't live anyplace in Wilmette. And that's a real shame. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to have housing units so that our children can stay in the community. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to have units where potentially grandparents who don't have the same income anymore can stay in the community and be near their families. So this means a lot to me personally, to many people I know whose children have gone through the fabulous schools that we have here and who would like to continue to have their children be part of this wonderful community. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Paul Kesselman. I live at 1933 Wilmette Avenue, and the project is in my backyard. Unlike some of the people who are walking around here with these nice little stickers, yes, in my backyard. This is in my backyard. The petitioner, over the last 2 years, has really not changed much of the plan. The first time he came forward, it was adjourned because it was late at night. He voluntarily withdrew the petition because he knew there were deficiencies. He withdrew the petition and said, well, let's have community discussions, which is great. I went to them all. Much of what was talked about at those community meetings has been ignored and is not present in today's presentation. All show no substance. The petitioner has not shown by any standard that it's entitled to the relief it's asking for. It bases its request on 4 benefits. Benefit 1, the stormwater management is benefiting and beautifying the area. Technically, I don't have the qualifications to contest that. Whether the stormwater runoff is right or wrong, some of the engineers and lawyers I've talked to say it does not comply. They're not here to testify today. But without better information, you can't make that determination that the stormwater runoff is actually a benefit to the village of Wilmette, and that the stormwater system is a benefit to Wilmette. The second, and if anything, it benefits the petitioner more than anyone. The use of sustainable design and architecture, benefit number 3. Once again, it primarily benefits the petitioner. The style is not my style, and it certainly does not comport to all the other buildings in the area. It does not comport to my single-family residence next door to the project. It's too big. It's unsightly, with parking outside and inside, not enough parking. If anything, it benefits only the petitioner. It does not benefit the village of Wilmette. That's not to say that low-income housing is not desirable for the village. There are many deserving low-income people who should be able to find a place. And in Wilmette. However, like they say, trying to put a square peg in a round hole, something doesn't fit right. This project does not fit right for Wilmette. The fourth benefit is truly the only benefit that may push it to the benefit of the village. Affordable or senior housing set-asides. At least that's their representation. I have yet to see, and like I said, I follow this very carefully and very closely, because the largest purchase I've ever made, my house, is going to go down in value by 5% or more. The set-asides may benefit Wilmette, but we don't know exactly how they're going to be administered. At various meetings, the petitioner has said, well, we're not allowed to set aside specifically for Wilmette. Since the law doesn't allow us to set aside specifically for Wilmette residents. Well, then how are we going to assure that the benefits that he's asking, that he's touting, are actually going to take place? That they're actually going to stay in place? Not just for the first set of residents that come in whenever this project, if it ever gets completed, does get completed, but what about the next year after the lease is up? What about 2 years? What about 5 years? I hope to be around 30 years. What about then? The second benefit also benefits the petitioner with accessibility features for the Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, it is desirable to have housing that folks with disabilities can utilize, but it sounds to me more like a selling point and a renting, something that you can put a brochure or wherever they advertise for this property. I hear a lot of good rhetoric. I see a lot of things that seem to tie dots together and put it together in a cohesive little package for everyone. But I don't see a lot of substance behind the bullet points, behind the PowerPoint presentations. I don't see any guarantees. This is something that's not going to disappear next week. It's going to be around for 30 years. And the decisions that you and the board will ultimately have to make affect this community for 30 years or more. And the track record that I have seen of the petitioner doesn't bear that out. The petitioner has not been in business for a week, a month, a year, or 5 years. They've been in business for 30 years. They've had so many issues, and you've seen from the last hearing, you've seen what goes on in the Evanston properties, what goes on in all the other properties. Professional property management is, quote, not new to them. This isn't something that they should have said, oh, geez, what are we going to do? So why is it that they now just go out and hire a professional property manager, the property manager of the year? Well, I think it's another little point on their PowerPoint presentation to put a nice little, to tie all the knots together. It's nice, but they haven't done it in the past. And there's no indication that after a year's contract is gone, that this will continue. This is not a temporary decision. This is not something that we can decide, okay, well, we'll look at it next week. We'll look at it next month. After the next election, we'll look at it again. This is something that's going to stick with us forever. You know,
if I could ask you to...
I understand.
Thank you.
It's important to me. It's
important to all of us.
It's important to everyone, okay? And I'm respectful of everyone's time. I don't think I've repeated myself.
You have not.
Okay. So, addressing one other thing. That I don't have any qualifications as a property manager, as an appraiser, as an engineer, or as a traffic consultant. However, sitting in my living room, I look out that window every morning just before I get in my car to go to work, and there's a line of cars going from Ridge, past my house, past the house next to me, sometimes to houses 3 to 5 down. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how many of these people are going to have cars. The village code requires that there be a certain amount of parking spaces because the village code assumes that there's going to be people with cars. I'm going to tell you that a lot of people who make less than 60% of the minimum have cars. They're not nice fancy cars like my Nissan or my wife's Honda or Lexus. They're cars. They drive. They get people to and from where they need to go. And I'm going to tell you, another 16 cars, another 8 cars, another 4 cars coming out, whether it's to a part-time job as a bagger or jewel, or whether it's to take a child to daycare, all in the morning, is going to have an additional impact on more than 1 second at that intersection. It's the intersection. Come out on a normal Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning. Sit at the American Legion. Watch the cars pile up from 7:45 to 8:15. I happen to know that time frame because that's when I go to work. I leave work every morning at 8 o'clock. Watch the cars. At night, on the way home, when I come home and I make my left turn into my driveway, I sometimes have to wait a long time. I don't know how long, because I'm not sitting there with a stopwatch, because I'm trying to get into, trying to go home. The traffic patterns, I'll wrap up. The traffic study, I have not seen an updated 2017, late 2017 or early 2018 traffic study. The last traffic study that was presented 2 years ago was flawed and does not adequately show the traffic flow as it is today, as it is in the village today. I appreciate your time. I mean no disrespect. I know you folks are going to do the right thing for the village and its residents. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I wonder if, in deference to the large number of people who would like to talk, that if we could have folks target, I don't know, 3 minutes. We're not going to be hard and hook anybody, but if people could target to keep their comments under, say, 3 minutes.
And if I could add to that, if someone has already said something that you intend to say, if you could either indicate that and indicate your support, or restate it as quickly as possible. Thank you.
I'm Hannah McNulty. I live at 2145 Thornwood Avenue in Wilmette. I've lived in Wilmette for 17 years and raised 2 kids here. My husband, Peter, and I support the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation's latest proposal to build an affordable housing project at 1925 Wilmette Avenue for families, disabled individuals, and veterans. The Affordable Housing Planning and Appeals Act of Illinois was adopted in 2003 because there is a shortage of affordable housing in our state. It encourages all municipalities to incorporate affordable housing within their housing stock sufficient to meet the needs of their county or community, and required municipalities with less than 10% affordable housing to adopt a plan by April 1st, 2005. The Village of Wilmette adopted an affordable housing plan in 2004. However, Wilmette still has affordable housing for only 4.1% of its residents, and all of it is for seniors. Statistics from the 2017 Illinois Poverty Report reflect that 26.4% of households in Cook County are severely rent burdened, and Cook County residents that earn the minimum wage would have to work 110 hours a week to be able to afford renting a two-bedroom apartment at fair market value. In Wilmette, 35.81% of renters are overburdened. Many of the arguments opposing the development of 1925 Wilmette Avenue have been heard before in communities similar to ours across the country. Increased crime rates, increased local taxes, increased traffic, and lower home values. A study out of Tufts University looked at some of the most controversial projects in Massachusetts that were completed before June 2006. This study provides significant evidence that the fears of a new affordable housing development are far more myth than reality. The study concluded, after construction was completed, controversy faded, and concerns were unrealized, many surrounding neighbors were unaware there even was a housing project nearby. Those that oppose the project have expressed their concerns, and Richard Koenig has addressed them in his new proposal. Let's be a part of the solution to poverty in our state, in our county, in our village. We can welcome 10 individuals and 6 families into our community and make it work. We have great resources. We are good people. Let's not let fear drive this decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Judy Goody. I live at 436 Prairie. I did submit a letter to the Plan Commission. I believe you received it yesterday, but I'd like you to indulge me. I won't read it all, and it's not going to take probably more than a minute, but I would like to make the remarks publicly. I've lived in Wilmette for 44 years. I served on the Plan Commission during the 80s while a new comprehensive plan was being developed, and on the Zoning Board during the 2000s. My 3 children grew up here and attended public schools. I urge you to support the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation's proposal for Cleveland Place. Wilmette is fortunate indeed that HODC proposes to develop affordable housing on the American Legion Post site. The location is most appropriate for a multiple unit residence, and HODC is an experienced developer of affordable homes. Many of the arguments opposing this proposal today are the same arguments that we've heard for decades. Each time affordable housing of any type has been proposed in Wilmette, and I've heard these arguments for years. I imagine others have also. Yet because of the hard work and dedication of people like Gene Cleland, a number of affordable buildings for seniors have succeeded in our community. It is time for Wilmette to welcome veterans, disabled people, individuals, and families who also require affordable housing. Now I'm going to repeat what the previous speaker said, but I had it in my notes beforehand. The Wilmette Comprehensive Plan encompasses a vision which acknowledges the value of diversity within our community and states that, quote, the village should strive to be free of discrimination based on, among other things, quote, source of income or housing status. Especially at this time in our country's history, When we hear messages of disunity and fear, Wilmette needs to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And this project, if approved, will help us be part of the solution. Thanks.
My name is William Schulten. I'm a Wilmette resident living in the Malincrot building, and I thank the Plan Commission and the Village of Wilmette for providing Malincrot. It's a wonderful community. It also has a set aside of 15% of our 81 units as affordable housing. I'm also an HODC board member, and it's because I believe in their mission. And the mission is supportive of one of the greatest objectives that we have as a village, which is to support affordable housing. This is a unique opportunity. We don't see projects like this come along very often. I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
My name is Bruce Smirch. I live at 215 Pin Oak Drive, right adjacent to the property at 1925. I have 3 points to make. One, concentrating people who are underclass causes problems. They tore down the Harold Ickes homes, they tore down the Robert Taylor homes, they tore down Cabrini Green, they tore down Stateway Gardens. Why? Because you concentrated all the poor people in one spot. I agree with you, we need more people who aren't quite so affluent to live in our community, and I would love to see that, but wouldn't it make much more sense to divide them up in various apartment buildings, buy 1 or 2, or better yet, the development that was built across the street, why didn't that have 2 or 3 places that would have been set aside for people who couldn't afford the normal rents? You can do that. You guys have the power. All you have to do is say, you want to build in Wilmette? Fine. Let's just have, out of these 18 apartments, we want 2 or 3 to be set aside for low-income people. And that would be good for everybody because, first of all, you wouldn't have all the low-income people concentrating and the perhaps problems that it would involve. Secondly, excuse me. Anybody got a drink of water? Secondly, it was addressed that it was a insubstantial effect on property values. I want to point out that right now in Pin Oak Drive, there's a unit for sale. I think it's like $200,000 or $210,000, and you can afford it. Some people can afford it, but people who would be buying it would be paying $40,000 as a down payment. Let's imagine that it only affected the property values 5%. Now, this is right adjacent. This isn't down the block. This is right adjacent. It's probably going to affect the property values somewhat. I think even all the suits here will agree that it has a certain effect. If it affects it 5%, the person who puts down $40,000 on that condo, as soon as that unit, the development is built, he's out $10,000. He's out 25% of his investment in that property, of his equity. Again, split it up. You have all those apartments on Ridge Road. There are going to be new ones. If it's going to be built, put in a 2 or 3 apartments for low-income people. Finally, I've had some experience with this because I owned apartment buildings in Chicago, and I welcomed poor people. I feel as compassionate about them as everybody here does. If you're going to have an apartment building, to have an award-winning board or an award-winning property management company isn't enough. Somebody should live there. Somebody invested in the building should have to stay in that place and oversee the situation. I had an 18-unit apartment building. Gene Cleland was my friend. I said, Gene, I understand you have all these issues about helping poor people. What can I do? She introduced me to the Section 8 system, which was great. I got help for some of the people in the building that I managed. But I was over at that building every day. I was not an absentee landlord. I was there every day to make sure that there wasn't any trash in any of the hallways, that somebody hadn't spent the night in front of a door and urinated. I took great care to make sure that it stayed good. And if you have an award-winning property management company, they're going to be in their property 2 or 3 miles away, and they're not going to see what's happening every day. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Gail Schnitzer-Eisenberg. I'm a Wilmette resident at 8th and Lake. I am here to speak to you in my role as a New Trier Township trustee. This year I had the opportunity to serve on the Money Follows the Persons Committee. That committee is charged with distributing funds amongst about 17 local organizations that help people who have developmental differences as well as mental illness. What we saw was a theme emerging over the months that we heard the hearings. That theme was that there is not enough housing in New Trier Township, especially in Wilmette, where people can stay in their homes and stay in their community after they leave their families. We, as a township, help students after they have graduated New Trier to find employment, but whether they have a developmental difference or a mental illness or a physical disability. However, on those kinds of employment that they are able to find, with the help of many of our fabulous community partners in the private sector, they're not able to afford housing in this community. We've seen many of the housing opportunities leave this area and go to Lake County, where they were able to find better options, more affordable housing. That is an issue that we can help address today. You can make a recommendation to the full board to approve this development and make a small step to making our community more inclusive and more welcoming, not only to new people, but to those people who are living here today, who have grown up in the families in Wilmette. We have about 100 families who are from Wilmette who are being served by the New Trier Township Food Pantry. These are families, about 48% of those families are the working poor. They are trying to cobble together enough money to afford housing on either minimum wage jobs or on a combination of part-time jobs. And the others are either elderly or physically disabled and unable to work. These are members of our community and members that we have a responsibility as public servants to remember when making our votes. So I hope that you will remember those members of Wilmette and make a recommendation to the full board to make this small step towards inclusion. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Medwin. I live at 848 Park Avenue in Wilmette. I've been a resident for 25 years, but I've been part of this community since 1975 when I started teaching at New Trier High School, where I had a fabulous 32-year career. In fact, I moved here because I love the students of New Trier so much that I wanted to raise my kids in this community. The kids at New Trier are learning values of tolerance. They're learning values of justice, of inclusion, of community, of the safety and well-being of all people. On the walls of New Trier, you see the mottos to commit hearts to compassion, lives to the service of humankind. And so those students are out there every week providing blankets to homeless people, stocking the New Trier food pantry and other food pantries with necessities, building houses in Waukegan for Habitat for Humanity, one of the most meaningful projects a lot of my students engaged in there. Why aren't the values of our community in line with what is being taught to its young residents? I have been so heartened by the young residents who have stood up in Florida against injustices there, and I have been heartened by what I've seen our students do here, standing up for justice in the community. I think it would be a great disservice to those students to not say yes in my backyard to this wonderful project. You want to know what a substantial benefit to the community would be? That would be it, to realize for these young people the values that they are being raised with, and to make them see them come to fruition in the town in which they live. Thanks. I do hope you will make that recommendation.
Good evening. I'm John Marshall. I live at 822 Prairie Avenue in Wilmette. My family and I have lived in Wilmette since 1994. I have friends on both sides of this issue. I've been getting lots of emails from both sides, lots of Facebook posts. And after looking over the material, I feel strongly in support of the Cleveland Place application. Why? What are the substantial benefits for Wilmette? First of all, I think the veteran set-aside is extremely important. These are veterans who've risked their lives for our country, and I think we need to make sure they have a place in Wilmette to live. For people with disabilities, so they can stay in our community, I think is an important, substantial benefit. I think reducing stormwater runoff is incredibly important. The village is talking about spending tens of millions of dollars, if not more than that, to reduce our terrible flooding that we get too frequently. And the fact that this building would reduce stormwater would be a substantial benefit for us. The appearance, I know some people are concerned about the appearance of Cleveland Place. Compared to the existing Legion Hall, I actually think it's probably an improvement. And then finally, but most important, is providing affordable housing for families and individuals in our community. We are way behind in that at this point, and this property would do so. And I looked at what kind of people would be living in Cleveland Place, given that the maximum income level would be $37,000 to $42,000 based on the family and the unit. And I looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics at average salaries for different careers. So who are the people who make below that amount and would be qualified to live in Cleveland Place? Preschool teachers, religious workers, floral designers, pharmacy technicians, home health aides, nursing assistants, crossing guards, waiters and waitresses, barbers, hairdressers, concierges, child care workers, retail salespeople, bank tellers, library assistants, and many other professions. Are these people providing benefit to Wilmette by living here? I think so, and I would welcome them. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just going to read it off my phone because I'm terrible at public speaking.
Could you give us your name? Thank
My
you.
name is Meg Maris. I've lived here for 44 years. I represent the entire Gambacorta and Maris family from a business standpoint and a personal standpoint. And when I say that under the current structure, we oppose the plan for Cleveland Place. Let me start by saying that I don't agree with the village forcing builders to include low-income housing into their developments, as one mentioned. That is a venture that one takes on as a rite of passage. I say this as a property manager to a vast number of properties that we own as a family limited partnership here in Wilmette. Now, we really don't know the impact of how this development will affect our surrounding home values. We can't speak that this will have a substantial benefit, as many have mentioned, or or a negative benefit. We have zero control at this point over who's going to be moving into these. So I guess that's my biggest concern. What regulations are placed in order to screen future tenants? Will there be a zero tolerance for any backgrounds with a criminal activity? How many units will be designated for the veterans? If they don't fill right away, will they be designated to somebody else? How many of these units will be for the elderly or someone with disabilities? So none of that and if it's in the paperwork, I missed it. The issue is not a discrimination of those who cannot afford housing or don't make the money. That's never, ever been the Wilmette way. It's people are afraid because there's not enough that's been spelled out to make sure that, if we have people living in these developments that are upstanding individuals that bring something to the table, as the gentleman before me mentioned, that will not hurt our home values. That will keep our values the monetary values and the value of Wilmette. I'm not worried about that. What I'm concerned about is I need to know what's been put into place, because after reading everything about all of other housing developments and the rules and regulations, you can put things into order where the owner of the development can say, no, we will screen for criminal backgrounds and we have a zero tolerance. We do want families in here. We will just take from Wilmette. Like, there are things, everyone can apply, but the list is so long for people waiting to get into housing that there is no way at this point unless things are put into place, put into motion. And I think that that's the biggest concern. If all of those things are put into a plan, then we would be in support of it. But without knowing who's coming and what's happening, it's just, there's too many what ifs, and the what ifs are bringing the fear. Thank you.
My name is Sheila Schaefer-Hirsch. I live on the 1700 block of Central Avenue, close to the proposed affordable housing development. I hate public speaking, so this is really important that I would even be here. I've lived here since 1990. My husband and I decided to move to Wilmette because we felt that we were moving into an open-minded, welcoming community. Over the years, I've known people who have had to leave Wilmette. Some of them are senior citizens who suddenly were on a fixed income and couldn't afford to live here anymore. There are disabled people who grew up here, but they don't make enough money to live here. And I've also known a couple of families who lost jobs and lost their homes and had to move. Affordable housing is an issue in Wilmette. When the new proposed building came on the scene, I got really excited and thought this is a good thing. And then I started getting some emails from people saying, no, 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 it's bad. They didn't exactly say why, so I decided to put my library science degree into motion and do some research. I looked at the League of Women Voters website, and I got a lot of really good information. One thing I found out that I didn't know is that 16% of Wilmette residents make under $50,000 a year. I found this to be really surprising. So clearly there is a need for affordable housing here. Over the past year, there's been a lot of controversy, and I really do believe that HODC has tried to deal with the concerns in a very positive way. But finally, I would like to say that according to the 2004 Comprehensive Plan from the Village, and this is a quote, "It is the long-standing policy of the Village of Wilmette to provide affordable housing options so persons with moderate incomes can enjoy the benefits of living in our community, and so our residents can enjoy the benefits of a community with economic diversity. This policy has been implemented with active village support or sponsorship as opportunities have occurred over the past quarter century. I really hope that the village will do the right thing and put this policy into action. Thank you."
Hello, my name is Carol Moskandreas. I live at 1616 Sheridan Road in Wilmette, Unit 8F, if that makes a difference. And I am here as a retired attorney, but I'm also here, and I think perhaps my most useful purpose here will be as the former executive director of the homeless shelter in Evanston, and that was a family shelter program and an adult shelter program, and we created a health service connected to that. But it gave me something that we don't usually get as middle-class people, and upper middle class, and that is an opportunity to see people who have really lost a lot. And I can tell you without any reservation, one of the major causes of homelessness is people not being able to juggle the cost of their housing. If your housing costs 50% of your income, that means anything can create a catastrophe where you lose it. I agree with the woman previously who pointed out the very wonderful language that Wilmette has committed to in terms of its goals. The goal of persons with moderate income enjoying living here, and residents enjoy the benefits of a community that's diverse. Those two prongs are what I'd like to talk a little bit about. First of all, I think there's a major misconception that people here speaking have had about this project, and that is they see people coming into Wilmette. We, in fact, have in Wilmette, now I'm not even taking the $50,000 income, 10% of the people in Wilmette right now have an income of under $35,000. That means they are on the edge. These are the people, and if 10% of the households, the last census said there were almost 10,000 households. So if 10% of these households are living on the edge, that's 1,000 households. You've got people who can benefit from living in this place right now, living in Wilmette. People don't need to wonder who's going to be living here. The people that are living here can be living here. So that's really important. Secondly, I guess I want to talk about what this opportunity provides for our community. People have talked about losing people that they have seen grown up here. And the plan we have written as a community says that we want our residents to enjoy the benefits of a community with economic diversity. Somebody raised the question, well, yeah, but why have them all clumped together? 16 people isn't a lot of clumping, but, and I think people here may not realize that we have a law, an ordinance in Wilmette, that says builders, when they build, can include low-income housing, or they can pay to get off of that obligation. Almost all of them pay to get off of the obligation. That's why we don't have scattered low-income housing in Wilmette. And so there's an important point for us to realize this is, Wilmette has also set a goal of 15% affordable housing. 15%. Right now, we have 140 house units. 15% of the 10,000 households would be 1,500 units. We're way behind in terms of meeting that goal. And the question becomes, what are we going to do about it? Now, I would suggest that you have a really good opportunity here, because this proposal, I can tell you from looking at other not-for-profit low-income housing proposals, this proposal is a good one that you are seeing. It is well thought out. It actually listened to the community. You gave it an opportunity to listen, and they did, and it improved. And the question is, if we are going to say this is what we believe, we want our residents to enjoy the benefit with economic diversity, if that's what we believe, when are we going to do it? Actions are testifying to our values. Actions show where we place our values and what we think is important. You have the opportunity here to act on a really sound low-income housing proposal. So it meets, you don't even have to do a zoning variance for it in terms of it's a permitted use. It's going to add to the tax rolls by paying taxes.
Could I ask you to wrap up your
Yeah.
remarks? Thank
So
you.
I'm just simply saying that if not now, with this good proposal, when? When will we become a diverse, when will we make room for the people that live here? And I think you have a wonderful opportunity, and this is an invitation for Wilmette to act on what it says its beliefs are, to become a more diverse, a more complete, a more compassionate place. Thank you.
Hi, my name is the Reverend Kristen Uffelman White. I live at 1130 Wilmette Avenue here in Wilmette, and I pastor St. Augustine's Church, which is at 1140 Wilmette Avenue. I'm grateful to lead a church with a longstanding commitment to inclusiveness and hospitality here in this community. We are happy neighbors across the street of Gates Manor, low-income, affordable housing for seniors. And I rise tonight in support of the Cleveland Place proposal. Thanks very much.
Hello, my name is Sue Lolbach, and I work at Connections for the Homeless, which still exists many years after Carol Moscandreas worked there. I also lead a coalition of nonprofits, 30 nonprofits, over 100 individuals called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. And we, including many of our Wilmette residents, drafted a document that we sent to commissioners. So I hope that you had a chance to take a look at that. I'm going to speak just very briefly. Besides seconding your concern about how short the microphones are here, I would also like to just bring to your attention, I recently found a study by Stanford University that was done in December 2017, and it's called Who Wants Affordable Housing in Their Backyard? An Equilibrium Analysis of Low-Income Property Development. And that study looked at affordable housing and its impact on surrounding property values in low-income neighborhoods, in high-income neighborhoods, in integrated neighborhoods, and in segregated neighborhoods. And what they found was that the development of low-income housing in poor neighborhoods increased property value, and that in high-income neighborhoods there was either no impact, or it increased the property values up to maybe 2.5%. And that was with larger developments. This is a small development. Okay, 16 units in Wilmette is not a lot. So this should have very little impact. I think I don't want to reiterate what other people have said. I think you've heard a lot of the arguments that I would have made, and I hope you will support this. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mary Chamberlain, and I live next door to the proposed development at 207 Pin Oak Drive. I moved in 2012 there, but I grew up in Kenilworth, and my parents grew up in Wilmette. This place is near and dear to me. I'm raising my daughter here, and we love Wilmette. And I'm also very outspoken on diversity. However, we are now building this a senior care facility on the former Ridgeview Plaza land, which is going to be a pretty big structure. And the footprint of this apartment building is just going to be very dense. And I just counted off the top of my head. I know we have a lot of kids in Pin Oak. We have 17 kids in Pin Oak that are under like senior year in high school or below. We've got from like 6 months in diapers to juniors and seniors. And some of the girls are in college, a couple of girls are in college. So we have a lot of activity. You got a lot of moms and parents going out to sports events and such. So we see the traffic. So I'm not really on board with what I'm hearing about this like minimal impact on traffic. It takes forever to get out of Pin Oak. But more importantly, it's like this it's so dense. First of all, Pin Oak is dense, okay? High Point across the street is dense. We're all very close to each other compared to the rest of Wilmette that has a little bit more easements between properties. It's to me, it's an odd space. It could be so well used as a park. Nobody's proposed green spaces, and there's not as many green spaces west of Ridge as there are east of Ridge. And I would love to see that for the 17-plus children that run around Pin Oak, trust me. And also, I know a ton of kids in High Point. And it's a really, like, school-focused area, especially Pin Oak, and in that area and the people across the way. We have a lot of trouble with the traffic on Wilmette and the kids that are going from, they're matriculating from Mackenzie to Highcrest. Well, crossing Ridge and then crossing Wilmette Avenue, there's no stoplight there where the guy puts up his Christmas stuff every year, you know, and you go down Illinois to get to Highcrest. Yeah, I remember when it was on the other side of town. So anyways, I would just say, like, that should be a big concern, like, so that we can get kids to cross to Highcrest safely instead of playing, like, what's that, Frogger game? And it's dense. It's so dense here that more cars, this whole proposal is thumbs down for me because of the density of this new development of this senior care facility, which I think is kind of doing a huge contribution to Wilmette. We've got Sunrise, now we've got this new facility. I think we're doing a lot of good stuff in Wilmette. I think Wilmette residents are really good people. So I am definitely not on board with it, and I agree with everything that Mr. Minoff said, the first speaker tonight, and I would like to bring back that attention to his wonderfully prepared statement. So that's all I have to say. I think it's really too dense of a property for that space.
Hi, I'm Martha Whitwer, and I also live in Pin Oak. I'm seeing a lot of signs that say, yes, in my backyard, and we don't really have backyards in Pin Oak, but we're the closest people to this development or proposed development. I agree with my neighbor Mary that about the density. There are 5 multi-unit buildings or developments on that intersection already. And to add a new small building on a school route in this very crowded area just to me seems dumb. I mean, I know there are a lot of smart people in Wilmette, and I support affordable housing, but cramming this in there with, as Mary said, artists going up, it just seems like a really dumb plan. I mean, I wonder if he or some group could maybe rehab a building that's already built. I don't know why we have to build a new building. I think having something closer or on Green Bay where residents who don't have cars, people keep saying, some residents won't have cars. Well, then they need to be able to walk to the grocery store. And this location at Ridge and Wilmette isn't suitable for that. So I support the idea, but I strongly oppose the location. I just think it's a really bad location. So all about welcoming and being a welcoming community, but let's do it in a smart way. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Caroline Goldstein, and I live at 1426 Lake Avenue in Wilmette. I grew up in Wilmette and moved back to raise my family 15 years ago. When I returned to Wilmette, one of the first things I did was join the board of Housing Opportunity and Development Corporation. I served on the HODC board for almost 10 years with knowledgeable and committed leaders like Jean Cleland, who had been working for decades to act on our shared community values. It was truly inspiring for me to work alongside so many Wilmette residents and North Suburban residents committed to developing and acting on strategies to support residents to stay in the area. Over the last year, to hear some of the misinformation and really falsehoods being spread about HODC and the work of some of these wonderful leaders has been truly upsetting. But I'm going to put that aside tonight because what we're talking about tonight is HODC's PUD application that I believe should be reviewed under Wilmette's existing zoning ordinance, not by fears and misinformation. As you know, Wilmette has an existing commitment to expanding affordable housing. The zoning variances requested by HODC are minimal in comparison to the clear public benefit of providing quality and affordable homes for 16 households. In addition, as noted, no funding is being requested by HODC from the Village of Wilmette. and Cleveland Place will generate property tax revenue that will support our schools, our village, our park district, and our libraries. This is a real opportunity to take action towards the village's existing commitment to supporting affordable housing, which is noted has been in place since 2004. Tonight, I ask the Plan Commission to have the confidence and the courage to act on what our community has already defined its values and follow our existing zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Golson. I'm married to Caroline, who just spoke. We've lived in Wilmette for 15 years at 1426 Lake Avenue and truly love the community. I served on the Plan Commission, as many of you know, including chair for 2 years, served for 8 years, and the value of Plan Commissions is critical. I am a strong believer in affordable housing. I've been working on affordable housing as part of everything I've done as an urban planner for 25 years. But tonight is not the decision of the Plan Commission to support affordable housing or not, because that's already established policy in the Village of Wilmette. The question tonight is, does this project meet the standards in the zoning code? There's 8 standards in plan development. I'm sure you've already reviewed these. And if you look through, Mr. Frank started this session tonight talking about the facts of this case. And if you look through the facts of this case, if this were not affordable housing, it clearly meets all of those standards. The exceptions it's asking for are minimal. We're talking very minimal in terms of parking. The projects that we work on now are generally requiring far less parking than the village requires. That is the trend of parking. Whether this were affordable or not, you'd probably have less parking needs than the village requires right now. So when we look at the standards, and I'm not going to go through all of them, we submitted the letter in advance, the issue is this does meet the standards, and it clearly provides public benefits, because affordable housing, and I made sure of it when I was on the Plan Commission, is specifically a public benefit in the ordinance. So it's not to establish policy. That policy already exists. Does it meet the standards? I believe it does meet the standards, and hope you vote for the project. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Michael Sullivan. I live at 448 Alpine Lane with my wife and 6-month-old child. I'm a member of the group that submitted that package to you. I do not support this PUD. I've been involved since the beginning of this process, and I don't think they took enough of our community input into effect. Their own projections say they're going to have less than 2 children in this whole facility out of a maximum of 40-something tenants, which I don't think plays well for families. My wife and I had a child last year, and if we lived in one of the 1-bedrooms, which I believe is the majority of the units, they wouldn't have renewed our lease. So I think this has a big impact on families in the community. I would favor a much smaller development that has a mixed-use component to it. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Donna Spicuzza. I live at 518 4th. I'm a new Wilmette resident, and I just wanted to address, well, first of all, I would support the application, and I urge the Plan Commission to make a recommendation to, to meet the affordable housing goals of the village and promote economic diversity. But I wanted to address something about property values that people mentioned as a fear. I think, the idea of property values is never a given. It's a risk. You're buying your house for shelter, not as an investment. Appreciation is your good luck and you're a blessing. But that being said, when I moved to Georgetown Square, I was told about the history of our development there. We're near the Linden L station, and there was an affordable senior building being put up, and the residents in the Georgetown Square were violently opposed to it because of property values. And the development went through, and it's existing now, and they're good neighbors, and we're all good neighbors. And I can tell you that property values at our townhomes have not been impacted at all, and they are very healthy and robust. I don't know if they went down the year it was built before it was done, but you can never predict that. So I would just say that I think the property value issue shouldn't be a concern for the commission in looking at this proposal. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ben Belkind. I live at 422 Cedar Lane in Wilmette. I've been a resident of Wilmette for the past 30-plus years. I'm not here to either support or oppose this project. I'm here to urge the Commission to examine the facts and the pseudo-facts that have been presented here with a very fine-tooth comb. And what do I refer to? I'll give you a couple of examples. We heard here some estimates about the influence on property values adjacent to the project. The control group, the comparison group, the statistical sample that was used to compare what would be the effect on the adjacent properties was, if I heard them correctly, 1 block away. I would argue that this is not a valid statistical sample. I would urge the Commission to require that a valid statistical sample is selected. It should be 1 block away, 2 blocks away, 5 blocks away. I would also urge the Commission to require that statistical tests be applied to the data and the confidence limit be at least at 95% confidence. What we heard today is gobbledygook and nothing scientifically valid. And last but not least, since I live on Cedar Lane and I use Wilmette Avenue very frequently on a daily basis to and from work, to and from Jewel, to and from the bank, and on and on and on. It's a heavily traveled street. You travel on Wilmette Avenue during rush hour, morning even, and even worse on close to weekends, Fridays, and the place is jammed. You add 3 more cars and you have to wait 3 more light cycles to get back home. So again, I would urge the Commission to take the emotions out of the equation and examine all the facts that you have heard today and probably prior to today. You have all that information. Examine it with a fine-tooth comb and make your decisions based on valid engineering concepts, based on science, based on valid math. Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. My name is Steve Surgisketter. I live at 226 Pin Oak Drive. I'm also on the board of Uncorked Adventures NFP, with the organization that Richard graciously let us use the Legion Hall for our fundraiser. That being said, I'm here to say that I'm against this development. There are a number of reasons why. First would be when this was first presented to the community, the input from everybody was that we wanted to have families into it. We've heard tonight that a large number of people that support it have indicated that they're going to have families living here. Through their own application, we've seen that they anticipate to have 1.5 children living in this, across the 16 units. So I think it's a fallacy that we're going to find families living here. With that being said, if we look at the residents who are going to be living here, and if they're going to be working, which we assume they are, they have rather limited public transportation options. The 421 bus runs weekdays. I think it's 6 to 9 a.m. and then 3 to 6 p.m. So if they have a commute that's outside those hours or on the weekends when the buses don't run, they're going to be walking at least a mile downtown to the Metro, to the Green Bay Road to hop on the Pace here. In terms of grocery stores, the Treasure Island is a half-mile away. I think anybody living here the first week of January probably would not want to walk a mile round trip to get your groceries outside in the elements. Just a moment, please. So with that being said, I think there are better locations in our community that would better serve the residents. If we do move forward with this, I believe we're setting our residents up for failure by having so many people, which potentially for 44 people, not 16 across the 16 units, but if they are fully maximum, you're going to have 44 people living in a residential lot here in Wilmette. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Schneider-Fabes. I live at 108 Woodbine in Wilmette, and I wanted to thank the Planning Commission for the time and also the opportunity for the community to share its perspectives. I know it's late, and so I'm just going to make a couple points. The first is that Wilmette's vibrancy as a community is enhanced by increasing opportunities to expand our economic diversity. HODC is a strong organization with a long-standing record of providing quality, affordable housing in the northern suburbs. I expect that the village staff and leadership will reach out directly to communities where HODC has projects and get the accurate facts and input on HODC's contributions to those communities as a partner and as a property owner. The village process should treat HODC with the same standards that we treat all developers. The project is providing a clear public benefit as defined in the Wilmette zoning ordinance. The modest variances requested are mitigated by those public benefits. On a side note, as I was listening to all the concerns about traffic, I wondered, in its heyday, how much traffic did the Legion Hall create on Wilmette Avenue? And I'm not a traffic expert, but I'm thinking that this might be a little bit less. Finally, I didn't mean to be funny.
Excuse me. Please have some decorum. Address the board and do not make comments while someone else has the podium. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In conclusion, I ask the Planning Commission to recommend approval to the Village Board. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Dave Weisel. I live on Sandy Lane in Wilmette. I've been here for 22 years, and I was part of the group that presented the binder that you questioned about. I think I have a number of concerns about this project, but I think the one that I find most concerning is the fact that everybody keeps referring to the Wilmette Affordable Housing Plan, and I read through the plan, and on page 4, I believe, it spells out specifically that a project that was 100% low income, there were a number of risks and was not recommended, that they were saying that it should be at the most possibly 15 to 20% low income, more of a mixed use, whatever. This project was never intended to be anything but 100% low income, which I think is not appropriate even according to our own plan. So I don't understand why we continue to engage with this configuration, and I'd like to see it changed to something that's agreeable, at least with our own plan. Having lived in the area, between the changes with artists and this, it really turns what's a residential neighborhood to me into like an institutional housing zone. It's like you're going to have this huge senior housing project next to a low-income housing project. How does that fit into a single-family neighborhood? I just don't think it does. And I would recommend that the village reject the plan. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tom Hepner. I live at 1234 Maple Avenue in Wilmette. I've been here for 46 years in 4 different homes in Wilmette because we appreciate the area and have raised our children. Our grandchildren are here. I support the plan, and I appreciate the suggestion of the chair that we not applaud or make any demonstrations, but I would suggest a possibility that you might ask for, at some point, a straw vote of those who are clearly concerned about this decision that you're going to make a recommendation one way or another about, to get a sense of the group that have shown up here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Molines, and I live at 206 10th Street. I'm a student at Loyola Academy, currently enrolled in Justice Seminar, a class focused on exploring social justice issues that are faced in our community. This year, we've spent many classes discussing poverty, homelessness, and affordable housing. I've also had the opportunity this year to volunteer at a homeless shelter in Evanston, where I've been able to talk with the shelter guests. Through this experience, I've come to develop a clearer picture of what it means to be homeless in our society. Homelessness's primary cause is the inability to access affordable housing. We have the opportunity with this proposal to help 16 households live in a wonderful neighborhood. I'm so blessed to live here, to be surrounded by a loving community, and I see no reason my income should be a barrier for others when it comes to enjoying these same comforts. Diversity only makes communities stronger, and inclusivity only makes more compassionate human beings. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rose Jubin. I am at 323 Vine Street. Just a little comment. I was around and on the Housing Commission when we did the Affordable Housing Plan. At that time, one of the developers that myself and the village president spoke to about maybe increasing some of the affordable housing in Wilmette was Richard Koenig. At that time, we knew of HODC, we knew of their reputation, we knew that they were highly qualified and had an excellent reputation in the field. I myself, too, am an affordable housing professional, and I have worked with not only Richard on a professional level, but also some of his staff, and I can tell you that here in Wilmette, we should be honored and proud to have a company like HODC come and work in our community to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing for those persons who need lower income housing. And I think that this should be accepted by the Planning Commission, this proposal, as well as by the Village Board, because it can be nothing but good things for Wilmette. This is what we need today. Thank you.
Can you hear me? My name is Kathy Miles. I live at 2007 Wilmette Avenue. And I apologize. I've scribbled a bunch of notes. I want to try to respond to some of the comments that were made today. I'm not going to be as organized as I would like. Let's assume that we all agree that there should be low-income housing. It's part of the plan. It's sort of it's what we all presuppose when we have these conversations. But what are the benefits of low housing? Why are we looking to have it in our community? Presumably, it's not because we want to stick those people there. Presumably, it's because we want to make people part of our community. I don't know how you all met the friends that you have in Wilmette, but I met them through my children when they were in schools. And I was a room mom, and I went to school activities, and I went to the park and met other moms who were there with their children. If you put people in a building that has no other members of the community, and they have no previous ties to this community and no future ties to this community, which you have to assume may happen. Because as much as I'd like to have your mom and your child and my cousin who used to be in the military living in that building, we don't get to pick them. We don't even get to line up first. The best HODC can tell us is that they will market to our families. But they have a residence in Evanston that has a waiting list a mile long. Nobody can believe that they're going to pass those folks up who have already been waiting for low-income housing and tell them not to come here. But the way we meet people in our community is by being out with our children. The way we meet people in a community is by attending community events that we can afford to attend. But we have a proposal here that will have up to 44 people in it, and according to HODC, less than 2, whatever that means, children. And I'll tell you, there probably will be no children, because nobody's going to bring one child into a building that has 44 people. They tell us that they need a parking waiver because these people won't have cars, they tell us. But either they have cars because they'll need them to get to public transportation, because we waived the building right across the street from public transportation from having any kind of low-income housing. We let them buy themselves out of that. Or they have to ride bikes or walk to 4th and Linden, where the CTA is. Either they have cars and they can get around, or they don't and they can't. Please don't tell me that people who are making $30,000 a year or less are going to shop for clothes at Joseph A. Banks. We don't have a Target. We don't have a Walmart. We don't have things that are accessible that for lower income people to be part of. But I also want to tell you that as people were speaking, I was writing down addresses. And it got pretty easy to predict, based on where people live, what their opinion was about this project. And that reason's easy. Somebody said it best. We don't know what's going to happen. Could be bad, could be worse, maybe it'll be better. But HODC wisely is comparing some of its track records in senior housing and family housing to this, which is neither. So if you want to look at what their track record is with low-income housing, without children and without seniors, look in Evanston. Look at the 911 reports that are part of the package you got. I was also part of the community that put that together. Look at the crime that went up. Talk to the neighbors of the people in those buildings, because the neighbors of this building are the ones that are opposed to it, because we shouldn't have to have a dice roll. Somebody said, let's follow the zoning rules that we already have in place. You know what? Let's have compliance with the zoning regulations, the parking, the FAR requirements, all of the the setbacks, all of the other things that make a building a good neighbor. We're not doing that. They're asking for relief from some of those requirements. And we're asking the people who live closest to this on the west side of Wilmette to absorb the risk for what's going to happen. And we already have a pretty good predictor of what that is, and we've pulled the records from those buildings. And I think it's important to look at those. We gave you all of the information you'll need for it. The Wilmette Low-Income Housing Plan calls for integrated housing. The best way to make people part of a community is to have them as neighbors, but we're not having them as neighbors. We're putting them in that building over there. They're not going to live next door to me and have a chance to meet me. I'm not going to walk into the building and start knocking on doors there, because the barrier to entry of a big apartment building is huge. Nobody walks into any apartment building where they don't live and start knocking on doors to meet neighbors. And they don't have the connections to the communities that come with children and come with school-age children in particular. And a lot of the people who support this, knowing what the history is at another similar type of property, the people who support this don't have children who get off the bus right where that building is. They don't have children who have to walk right past that building to get to the closest park, which actually happens to be in Evanston over at Lovelace for most of us. So asking the people who live nearby to take a chance, because the people who don't live nearby are hoping that perhaps some family members will end up in this property, is just not the right approach. If we're going to have low-income housing, let's integrate it through our community. Let's make sure people become friends with our children and with ourselves. Let's make sure they have a chance to succeed because they have a support system of people who have succeeded. Let's make sure we get to know them so that to the extent we can offer help finding better paying jobs and better opportunities, we can meet them so we can recommend them to those opportunities. With the money that will cost the village by this property not paying market rate property taxes, we could buy apartments for low-income housing residents and put them in places where they're more likely to succeed. And I think if we don't focus on some of those solutions instead and ask the neighbors of this property to take the potential hit of 5% to their property values, and I'll tell you that's not what I was hearing from my real estate agents, but 5% of a $500,000 house is still $25,000. It's still a lot of money. And it's not fair to ask the people who live nearby to take the chance that that's going to be the impact. And, oh, by the way, that study was, again, family housing and senior housing and the impact that those had on property values. It's not the same thing that is being proposed here. I would love to see some family housing here, but that's not what they're offering. If we're not going to invite low-income people into our community to avail themselves of our resources, the most important of which is our schools, we're missing a real opportunity to change outcomes. Instead, we're going to have people who likely have no connection to the community, stay here for a while, and then likely have no connection to the community. How is that helping anybody? We have a chance to help people. And if we could rethink this plan, instead of shoving 44 people into a single family plot, we could actually have real solutions that people could support. And I would be the first one to stand in line. If you told me that there was going to be a low-income family that needed a home here, I would open my doors, because that's how my children are going to learn to open their hearts. But they won't have a chance to meet anybody in this building. And that's a shame. It's a real missed opportunity. I oppose it, and I hope the Plan Commission will ask to come back with something better.
Thank you.
My name is Andy Reese. I live at 411 Pine Manor Drive. I am roughly 100 yards or a pitching wedge from this property. I would suggest that the commission go and review the previous meetings on this topic. There were a lot of good speakers there who had brought up a lot of different points, especially some mental health professionals who are the professionals, and they talked about the different stigmas associated with low-income housing, putting everybody in one place, which is something that the Affordable Housing Plan for Wilmette doesn't recommend. So I'm not that professional, so I would suggest you go and hear from those individuals who did speak previously. A couple of things with regards to this property. So when they first came out with the property, they had 10 one-bedrooms and 10 studios. That would have been 30 occupants to the building maximum, if my numbers are correct. As far as to date, with the new plan, the maximum amount of residents within this building would be 44. Okay, 44 residents on a single family lot. So approximately, I think it's 50 or 75 by 175. So where you see a lot of tear downs going on, think of that lot now with 44 people in it. That's a house party, okay? And there's no management on site, okay? That's a concern. I manage 2 apartment buildings. I'm there, if not daily, every other day to check in on my properties, okay? If you're going to have low income, if you are going to have people with disabilities especially, you need on-site management for them, okay? And not pointing them in a direction, okay? You need to have the services there for them and readily available. The property management that I've heard from Richard in the past, they said there's going to be somewhere in the area of about 20 hours a week of somebody there. That will include janitorial staff, people who are there to mow the grass or what have you. I don't see how that is on-site property management, checking in on the residents and making sure the building is taken care of. As for the parking, okay, if we're going to grant a variance on this, what is the use for this property in the future? Heaven forbid this doesn't work out and another property owner comes in and buys it. He's now, or she, is inheriting a building that has less parking, okay? I think part of the reason for the standards, the zoning standards, is to make sure that there is future use and a property isn't encumbered by a situation such as this where we go in and grant variances, okay? The stormwater management system, I haven't gotten a clear indication as to what if this is a benefit or if this is code. So that's above my pay grade, but from what I'm gathering, if we're going to have another institution build something similar to this and it would be for profit, it seems as though this is code. So maybe they're going a little bit over code to extract some sort of benefit, but it seems as though the stormwater management system that they're proposing is code. So I don't see how that's necessarily a benefit to the community then. They talked about their management of the different properties and how long they've been with HODC. And that's a great thing, having that employment longevity. The downside of it is that when you go to look at their performance and their track record, that's the same people who are managing the properties now as who used to work at HODC. Whether they changed their structure or not, that was their management style. How much of that has changed? I don't know. If they know that their Evanston building that has been people brought it up as being an issue. If it was having that much trouble, why didn't you address it and take drastic measures to try and change that? If we talk about the taxes on the property, just the property itself, and what Richard would be paying, I believe the number is somewhere in the area of $10,000 to $15,000 a year. Let's make it 20 and just round it up. If this property was to be used as the NR that it was zoned for, where it would have commercial use on or retail on the first floor with commercial upstairs, you'd probably be in the area of around $50,000 to $60,000 a year in taxes. That's just property taxes. I'm not even getting the sales taxes. Take that over 30 years. You start getting over $1 million of lost taxes to the village. Okay, we need to make sure this is a significant benefit to the community. And when you go and put 44 people into a building, where is it? That's a 46% increase from their first run at this where they only had 30 residents. So you're increasing the building by 46% for the occupancy, and there's no families. 1.5 to 1 3/4 children. When we want families in the community, why can't we build a nice, let's call it 2-story building, okay, with 2 to 4 units, and put families in there. Give them 3 bedrooms. Let them be able to use the schools. Give them that access. You're jamming too many people into a building right now. The approximate square footage of this building for the 1 bedrooms is 350 square feet for a person, okay? Now, at the 1 bedrooms, it's 265 square feet per person. Right, you want me to wrap it up? We all want this wrapped up.
It's only been about 15 minutes that you've been up there, that's all.
The 2 bedrooms, 178 square feet per person. That doesn't seem like a whole lot of living space for the people living in this building. Thank you. Have a great night. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jane Hornstein, and I live at 1610 Highland Avenue. I am the former chairman of the Housing Commission here in Wilmette. This village has for years actually put a rent subsidy in the budget, which was cut in 2008. This is the first time we've had an opportunity since then to house these disabled families. It's the first time that we've been able to step up to the plate. I highly recommend that we do so. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Strange. I own the 82-unit building next door to this property. And the idea of the affordable housing is okay. I have probably the most affordable housing of anybody in this village. I have about 20 people in 20 of the units in my building now are people who are receiving vouchers or funding from Catholic Charities or other charitable groups. I can speak from actual experience what's needed and what's going to go on. First of all, the idea that these people are going to have jobs is probably not true. Most of the people that we have are disabled people, with some type of mental disability who can't work but can live by themselves. And most of them, I'd say not most of them, I'd say 60% have cars. But what I found is what I'm disturbed about and what I don't like about the plan is they have nobody on site to watch what's going on there. I have 2 full-time managers living in my building that watch everything. We've had all types of petty crime that they've stopped or found. We've had people try to come there for the vouchers from Section 8, and we've had prostitution. The villages, the police have come and arrested the people. We've had some drug dealing. We evict these people, but it takes 5 months to evict somebody in Cook County by the time the sheriff comes out. You have to, and the idea that these people are going to be from Wilmette is not true, can't be true. They're obligated to take people, they can't discriminate based on where you live. They have to take people on the list or coming by and, that are applying. You can't turn somebody down because they don't live in Wilmette. This is going to be a problem. So the other problem I have with this is it's way too large for the site. This should be maybe 7 or 8 apartments. If I was developing this property, it would be 6 or 8 apartments maximum. There's not one bush shown, not one blade of grass. It's all concrete. And the fact that they're treating the water is fine, but Wilmette, it's not in character with the community. Everyone has grass, we don't have an urban landscape here. We have a suburban landscape. And to have a building without any type of grass or greenery and a 3+1 or a 2+1 setting, I mean, they stopped building those in Chicago or anywhere long ago because they're unsightly. Who wants a building with no greenery at all, just a concrete mass there? Too many units for the space. That's what disturbs me the most. No supervision of the people on the site. That disturbs me. These are people, a lot of them, they're not working, they're idle. And you have to watch what's going on, or else you're going to have a problem there. And it's not fair to the other neighbors or me. I back up to this, and if they have lesser units with some type of greater management, I'm fine with it. But otherwise, I would urge you not to accept this. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Lee. I live on 400 block of Pine Manor Drive. I see that I'm the last one tonight, so I'm not going to use up 35 minutes left. I moved to Wilmette 15 years ago. My wife and I raised 3 kids, and it's a welcoming community, and as a lot of the folks here today testified to, it's a community worth protecting, growing, and growing ways that a lot of us today talked about, whether that be diversity in different ways, whether economic or otherwise. And I think there's a lot more that we could agree on among us, even between the proponents and opponents of this project, that I think this is not a referendum on whether Wilmette desires affordable housing or more housing stock that fit into that category. I think the village has spoken many years ago, and I think from what I heard, I haven't heard one person talk about saying we do not want affordable housing stock in Wilmette and more of it. And also, this is not a referendum on whether HODC should be allowed to develop low-income housing in Wilmette at 1925 Wilmette Avenue. It could, so long as it complies with the zoning requirements, like we all do. Issue is, ultimately, for you, you have to look at what's in the thick stack of documents that they produced and submitted to you, and it's your job to parse through those documents and figure out what exactly is being proposed. You know, I could tell you as a man of color, as a son of a single mother who raised 3 kids, I have benefited from the generosity and the process that are available for families like ours. So this is not a NIMBY reaction. This is not a YIMBY reaction. This is really a process that really should focus on what's in these documents. And let's talk about that. We talked about how wonderful it would be to have more affordable housing stock. That's right, I agree. But again, I think what's being lost here is what is actually being proposed. Not just a concept, having more affordable housing stock, but what brick and mortar structure is going to go in, how that impacts the neighbors, and whether they have a financial viability and competence to have a long-term success in this town. We haven't had a facility like this, so this is our first time go around. And second point that you ought to focus on is who gets to develop it, and what is the track record of their company, of that person. And let's talk about some of the problems that are mentioned today. We heard about the height, the bulk, the lack of below-grade parking, non-compliance with the total parking space number, lack of areas for emergency vehicles and garbage trucks to be able to go into the property and have a proper turnaround. It's going to be done in front of their front yard, right along Wilmette Avenue. And there are a number of other variances that are being requested. And I was asking, why are they asking those variances? And some folks say those are minor nuisance. Other folks say they are significant. And I think that's up to you to decide whether they are minor or whether they are significant. But I was thinking,
Mr. Lee, could I ask you to bring your remarks to conclusion? The line's gotten longer.
Oh, I see. Thank you. If you could give me 2 minutes, I'd finish. And I was wondering why these variances are necessary. And you know what? It comes back to one thing, and it's right in the document. I'm going to ask you to turn to the budget for the property. And It's under the section, it's about middle of the document, and it talks about what it costs to develop this property and how much developer's fee that HODC will get. It's $715,000 on a property that costs $3.7 million to build. And that comes out to about almost $390 per square foot of living space that's being created. And I think, I'm not a builder, I'm not a zoning lawyer, but I think that's an extraordinary high per square foot number. And if you were to look at the number, the reason these numbers are so high is because they're trying to pack in as many as 44 people in a single family lot. And I keep asking, why can't they build something smaller, something that is more dignified for the residents, something that is safer, that is more reasonable, and that is more livable, frankly. Packing 44 people into a space, to me, that doesn't seem like a good solution to me. And all those variances, at least in my view, are caused by their desire to maximize construction cost, developer's fee, and by the way, severely underfund the operating expenses for going forward maintenance. And I just got one minor point that I want to address. I heard a lot about property value. That's a hot button issue. It's a personal issue, emotional issue. Then I looked at every single document that they produced and submitted to you. And one was from 1996, on a study done in an urban setting in early 90s. That's not Wilmette today. Another one is the one by Richard Green. That's a 2002 publication on studies done from 1990 through 2001, again in a large urban environment. That's not Wilmette in 2018. And to the extent that there is a one document that does make sense is a study done by Federal Reserve of Kansas City. And let me read to you. Ultimately, conclusion was that, and this is what HODC submitted.
I'm going to have to insist that you wrap your comments up, Mr. Lee.
Thank you. Let me just read one statement from the document.
One sentence.
Thank you. The conclusion was inconclusive as to whether there is a meaningful impact in affluent area. But what he said in conclusion was extended results suggest that crime rates associated with proximity to LIHTC, I believe that stands for low-income housing tax credit developments, may erode these benefits and leave a net negative impact on the surrounding area. So at a minimum, it's a wash, it's unknown, we don't know, and for them to claim that the property value is going to go up, I think is unsupported. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Manning. I live on Forest Avenue. I came late, so I apologize if people have already said all these things, but since I've been here, there are a couple of things that I heard that I felt like someone needed to respond to. Mr. Lee just said this is not a NIMBY situation, and in the 15 years that I've lived here and the 47 years that my husband has lived here, it's always been a NIMBY situation. I mean, since I've lived here, there have been repeated attempts to create more integrated low-income housing, and there's been such a pushback, probably by a lot of people in this room and by the community, and so it's come to this, where it's a standalone building that's low-income. So it is what it is. That's what you get when you push back against every other attempt that's been made. When other buildings, when the Green Bay Road Residences building went for sale, there was a lot of talk about that. People didn't want even a couple of units in that building. So here we are. At some point, we have to still just be brave and do it. I'm all for it being reasonable and being, within, like, not being too big of a building, but on the other hand, we grant variances for McMansions every single day in the village. I mean, I can't tell you how much flooding we get in our backyard because the McMansion was built next door and took up, all the impervious surface. So it happens. So I would be all for the village not letting that happen in any situation, but since it does, to just pick on this one development for that doesn't really wash with me. And then as far as it not being a good location for the building, it's not a big pasture there on that corner. There are there's businesses, there are buses that do go by there, there are other apartment buildings. It just doesn't seem like that's a valid argument for being against this plan. Do I want it to be reasonable and reasonably sized and safe? Yes, I do, but I think a lot of these arguments are just more of the same NIMBY that I've been hearing since I've lived here, and I support the program, the project, and I'm against that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Nancy Hoying, and I live at 901 Forest Avenue. Thank you for your service. I'll be brief. The need for the affordable housing has been established. The plan has been created to show public benefit. But one thing that I think we need to be encouraged to remember is that the fair housing laws have been put in place so that we do not get to decide who specifically will be our neighbor. We do not get to decide if the individual living next to us is the person we want to be living next to us. That the questions tonight raised around whether it will increase crime rates, whether that it's too many individuals living in a low-income housing location at one place is in fact our fear talking and possibly our biases and possibly discriminatory practices. And I just simply wanted to remind the board of the fair housing laws that were established back in the 1960s to avoid those fears from emerging into our practices and policies in affordable housing in Wilmette. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mitch Klein. I own the gas station at Wilmette and Ridge. I, too, am for affordable housing. As far as this particular location, I welcome it, but not this size. It's just too dense, too much coming on the corner. If anybody should benefit from it, it would be me, because I would expect to get gas customers and repairs. Same thing with Artemis when they built, or they thought about doing what they're doing. 62 beds. How many people am I going to get as customers? Well, obviously, the patients are not going to be my customers because they're not driving, but the employees are. The corner is a problem now with traffic, and when Artemis opens up, it's going to even be worse. Today, we had 3 cut-throughs at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I had 5 going the other direction, lining up because they couldn't get across Ridge Road. So that traffic pattern is going to get worse. We've had the police sit on a lot to get these people, and it's consistent. They'll sit there for 2 or 3 days, and it won't happen for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The other problem with the parking, or not necessarily the parking, but the traffic pattern, you've got the 2 buildings, one across from me at Wilmette and Ridge on the northwest corner. If their entrance and egress were reversed, you cut out a lot of traffic trying to make the turn into that parking lot. The same thing going into where DDK is across the street from me. Going eastbound on Wilmette Avenue, you've got 1 lane of traffic, and somebody decides to make a left turn, backed up all the way down Wilmette Avenue, because they've got that 3-lane traffic light. 1 going right, 1 going center, 1 going left. It's a nightmare. The corner can support low-income housing, not in this depth. It needs to, if any builder were to build on that property, you would require them to build to size. We know it. And we only ask that you require these people to do the same. If they build responsibly, that's good neighbors. And I welcome it. And like I said, I would probably benefit more than anybody else around here for it. Now, Jeff has talked about the problems that he has with his low-income housing. Well, what did we have last week, Jeff? Somebody died in your building, overdose. What did we have today? Somebody else died in that building. Now, you've seen 2 ambulances, 2 fire trucks, 2 deputy fire chiefs, 1 deputy police chief show up there. This is manpower. And when the building now goes in where Artemis is going in, do you not think that the fire department is going to be going there to transport people to the hospital? It's a good possibility. I would like to hope it's not as drastic as it's been. But we've seen it happen with the drugs going on at his building. What did happen, they were selling out in front of the old 7-Eleven. They got rid of them. They were cooking drugs in the building. Well, yeah, he evicted them. They got rid of them. The sheriff arrested them. But now you're talking this building, what are we going to get? We can't be sure that we're going to get Wilmette residents. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion. The federal government says we can't pick and choose. And we need to be able to pick and choose if you're going to build a building of this size, like the people are saying. Now it's up to 44, whereas before it was around 30. It's too dense. And we need your help to make a recommendation to the village board and say, hey, wait a minute, let's step back a bit. Let's do the right thing for the corner. It may not be the right thing for these people because they're not going to make enough money. I keep hearing them say they're a non-for-profit organization. That's what HODC is. But the people that are funding them, they want to get their money back. And they want to get paid. And they are for profit. I don't care what anybody says. Somebody has to be paid back. I thank you very much for your time, and I hope you consider it.
Hello, Madam Commissioner, members of the committee. My name is Donna Nye, and I live at 473 High Crest Drive, which is off of Illinois Road, which is an offshoot of Wilmette Avenue near Ridge Road. And I'm concerned primarily about the welfare of the tenants of the building. In terms of the 20 parking spaces, my understanding is that the covered parking, that as you go toward the covered parking and as you go deeper into it, if you cannot find a parking space, if they are all filled, there is no way that you can easily do a U-turn out of that parking garage. Apparently there will be a designated spot, one spot, where a three-point turn can take place down there. And I don't know the driving abilities of anyone else in this room, but for me to do a three-point turn takes 10 minutes and multiple times. So I assume there will be auto accidents down there. I assume there will be people trying to get out of some parking spaces when someone is still trying to turn around. Heaven forbid there's an emergency and the cars are backed up there looking for parking and people cannot get in and out. So that's the number one concern. Number two about the parking lot is if this is indeed for handicapped people, special needs, veterans, older people, there is only one designated handicap spot, one out of 20 spots for accessible parking. And I know not everyone will have a wheelchair or a walker or need all that space. Nevertheless, if that is your goal, if that is your aim, I do not understand one handicap spot. That's that. Turn around again, egress, access. The fire department and the police department signing off on this also mystifies me. I read as best I could, and I apologize. I don't know whose package it was. I went through 800 pages last night at 11 o'clock at night, that the fire department may require an additional pump or some water reservoir to be added to the building. And I didn't understand the engineering, et cetera. But apparently there is not, as of this date. Number one, the fire department did not say it's necessary. They said they will assess whether it will be necessary or not. But if it is, where indeed will that go in this very tight, contained, cramped building? And I wonder how the police and fire department could have signed off on this, given they're saying, they might need this, they might not. Well, then why would you, as a fire department, sign off on that, saying they might need this additional pump or water reservoir? Also, the police department signing off. I'm very impatient. I have the morals of a cat. So if I am driving west on Wilmette Avenue and the traffic is backed up, as it is every morning, every night, I will cut through the Antique Mall parking lot, go down their little driveway the wrong way, the one-way driveway, to get on Ridge, to make a left turn on Washington so I can circle around and get to my house on High Crest. Otherwise, I can sit at that intersection for 10 minutes at that light, just being 4 cars removed from the light, just never moving. If I am going east on Wilmette Avenue, and I want you to know I do not go on your property, I go go across the Shell station. And I illegally, but I do this religiously. This is part of my morning routine to go east on Wilmette Avenue. I cut through that Shell station because I'll be damned if I'm going to spend my precious time sitting at that light forever. So to say that the traffic will not be impacted could not be true. Also, the VFW post. My husband was a veteran. My son is in the U.S. Marine Corps. We've gone to the veterans bar multiple times where people were glued to those seats from morning till night. I don't think there was much traffic going in and out. You came in the morning and you left after the last call, and that was it. So I don't think there was a great deal of traffic. I really do believe the traffic study is flawed. And I do worry about parking underneath the building. I worry about emergency vehicles. I do believe we need affordable housing. We need it for handicap. We need it for veterans. We had Walter Reed and his wife, Jean, and their son, Brian, members of this community for forever, who gave so much. Brian, their son, one of their sons, special needs. He lives out in a western suburb, so he could live independently in an apartment which was not accessible to him in Wilmette. Untold resources his family has, but there was nowhere for their son to live here.
Could I ask you to wrap up your comments?
That's it.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
I'm Erin Sullivan. My address is 448 Alpine Lane, and I've been coming to these meetings since like 2015. Hi, Richard. This has been going on a while. I was one of the people who contributed to the large packet that you had received. In that packet is some information that we found looking at the properties in Evanston. Some people alluded to problems with the Evanston properties. I believe that some of the buildings there became run down sooner than the HODC had expected, and they requested money from the village of Evanston to help with that. So it looks like $570,092 for 131 Callan Avenue and $300,000 for 1930 Jackson Avenue to make repairs to the building that were unexpected. And at these meetings that we've been going to for years, we asked, well, what's going to happen in Wilmette? Is Wilmette going to pay if the building runs down sooner than you expect or unexpectedly? Not because of the residents who are there, this isn't like a statement about the type of people who will live there, just who's paying for this. And HODC shared that they have reserves, that we wouldn't have to worry about that in Evanston there was a different system, and in Wilmette there will be reserves to pay for that. So I was looking at the budget for the property, and I find under reserves $6,400. That doesn't seem like it's going to cover these large expenses if there are problems with the property. And if there are problems, Wilmette's not just going to let this building get run down. I feel like we're going to put in the money, and where's that money coming from? So I, for practical reasons, oppose this plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of minutes, I guess. My name is Igor Spektor. I live at Pinoak for 20 years, and 7 years before that I lived in Lester Strange rental, which now managed by Jeff Strange, his son. When I came to Wilmette, I just immigrated from Soviet Union in 1990. I was poor, and I found affordable housing. I submitted my application. It was considered, it was filtered through certain criteria, and I got okay, and I lived there. I know that Mr. Strange was very good landlord. Everybody filed application. There were some good factors and bad factors, and this is what landlords do. They basically filter people. Selection criteria is very important, and I'm not emphasizing low income. It has nothing to do with low income. There are other selections. So our low-income people, and I am for low income, are qualified already. There is a problem, however, there are some low-income people we don't want to see here. For example, people coming from jail. They need to live somewhere. And let me place a devil advocate. Why not here? Or people coming from mental institution. They have to live somewhere. Why not here? So basically, this shouldn't disqualify them. what should disqualify them, those other criteria. And actually, people coming from jail are not protected class, by the way. And we really would like to look at their criminal history. So basically, this is just my preliminary remarks. Let me read whatever I wrote. Basically, I am for the low income, but I am against this particular project, and not because of this project size, because of this project type. So if Mr. Koenig tell me I agree to reduce my size to 10 units, no variation, I would say no. And the reason is here, and I'm reading. What HODC propose? 16 units, too many for small lot. Use of 100% low-income units concentration poverty model, also known as a project. Use of adverse selection and PSH tenants. And I will explain it a little bit. It's not about discrimination. What is 100% low-income units concentration property model? I'm going to read from the article. For decades, American government efforts to house the poor have relied on construction of subsidized housing plots, more commonly known as projects. The term originally used to describe the improvement projects city planners believed this development would amount to, has instead become synonymous with inner city blight and crime. Today, urban legend, news reports, and rap lyric detail the deadening effect of concentrated poverty and misguided public policy that those projects have become. Chicago-owned Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor homes are infamous examples of the projects. I'm going to submit this information to you guys. I'm not going to read everything, so you can look at it. I attached whole article in attachment F. Another question, why 100% low-income unit concentrated poverty model is unacceptable for us? Because 100% low-income model guarantees adverse selection. No screening, it's guaranteed, and bad management, it's guaranteed. I have attachment A, B, C, and D in support of those claims. Attachment A is HODC track records of bad management. Attachment B, it's tenant selection criteria consistent with PSH 7. It's called SMI, serious mental illnesses, and there is another requirement for PSH. It's criteria number 4, where those people are coming from. Residents of long-term care facility, at risk of placement in nursing facility or extended long-term patient in state hospital, etc., etc. And
Could I ask you to wrap up your remarks, please?
So, why HODC like 100% low-income units concentrated property model? Because this way HODC gets general financing, total financing $5.8 million, and amount and annual payment $1,200. I would like you guys to ask yourself a question. What they promised to those people who gave them this money, this amount of money practically for nothing. There is serious obligation here which were not disclosed and we don't know it. My second point is what Village of Wilmette gets out of this plan? Increase of crime, decrease of local community safety, decrease of local property values. What Village of Wilmette affordable housing plan say? Mixed model with 15-20% affordable units, because experience elsewhere has shown that larger percentage of affordable housing units might make the project unsound from both financial and social perspective. It's our plan, it's not my perception.
These points have been made this evening already.
I know.
Could I ask you to wrap up, please?
Okay, I will just read my concerns. First concern, project will cause increase of crime, decrease of local community.
Mr. Spector, I think you've told us your concerns. Could I ask you to conclude?
Okay, I will submit it to the record then. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Sorry.
Here. Thank you for putting right in. Yeah.
It's 10 o'clock almost, but I would like to suggest that we close the testimony and seek a motion from the commissioners.
I have some questions I'd like to ask.
And
Yes.
I think what I'd
In
like
the
to
context of asking them questions?
Yes.
Yes. So can we do that after we have this motion?
I think the
Because
time for
it's-
discussion is following the motion, and you can ask questions. Am I correct in
Fact-finding?
that?
Well, yeah, so what I believe that the chair is proposing is that the public comment testimony portion of this be closed, now leaving you as the commissioners to ask any questions of any of the people that spoke here today, including the applicants. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Commissioner?
Fine.
Okay.
Is there a motion to approve the proposed development for 1925 Wilmette Avenue as submitted?
Well, I think that's maybe a little premature. At this point, it would be a motion to close the public comment portion
Then
or
we can have the
public
discussion. I
testimony.
think that's what.
So if there's a motion to close the public
I'm not reading
testimony.
from my script.
Motion to close the public comment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second. Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Ayes have it.
I hope you don't mind it took over as
No,
parliamentarian.
thank you. Thank you very much. I need all the help I can get.
It's late.
So now we move into a discussion by commission members of the testimony and the presentation regarding the development. And I think before we open it up for discussion, I'd like to just remind everyone who's present that the purpose of the Plan Commission is to determine whether the proposed development meets the standards that are established for planned unit development considerations, and to balance those factors against the benefits that are being provided by the proposed development. And benefits are in the eye of the beholder, as is compliance with the factors. But it is not part of our prerogative to rule on the appearance of the building. It's not our prerogative to rule on the mix of uses within the development or the financial structure of the deal or, for that matter, the proposed management procedures and processes.
Well, the only thing I would correct is it is within your purview to look at the appearance of the building.
Okay.
If you have comments on the materials or items such as that.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So having said that and having been corrected, thank you, I'd like to open it up for questions, discussions, comments.
I would just like some clarification on the stormwater report.
And I should mention that we also have Dan Manus, who is our village engineer here also,
Yes.
who might be able to lend some insight on
I
that.
read through this report, and it looked like, it's one of the factors that was stated as community benefits, dealing with the stormwater, but it did look like it was just slightly more than what would be required. Looking at the report, perhaps I didn't understand it. So I'd just like that to be explained. I mean, it looked like it was within the bounds of what was required, but not much more than what was required, and just so we could understand what it said.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Dan Manus, Village Engineer. And they are meeting the expectations that would be expected for commercial and multi-unit buildings, where they're collecting all the stormwater runoff that falls on the site, detaining it, allowing for some infiltration through green infrastructure, and then slowly releasing that stormwater runoff into the village system.
Yes, I mean, but just in terms of the this Hager engineering report, I gather that's what you're talking about, that's in the materials?
Correct.
Yeah, and so, just so I understand it, I really didn't, I know it's late to be talking about stormwater, but it's a big issue for the village, as everyone knows. So, as I was looking at this, it talked about, something like a requirement of controlling 0.81 acre feet or whatever it is, and it was 0.80 acre feet. So it looked like it was just barely within the bounds of what would have been required, and not much more. Just looking at the numbers. So I just want to understand what it says. I don't understand the report. I'd like you to explain it to us.
Yes, they're collecting and holding the stormwater runoff a certain volume, and they're using methodologies set forth by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District's Watershed Management Ordinance, and it's pretty specific guidelines on how to control stormwater related to development. And so these are the same parameters that are used for other developments in town.
Right. So, for example, I'm just looking at the report just to understand it. It said required storage using the Metropolitan Water District standards, peak storage, 3,498, I guess that's cubic feet. Is that what it is? Or
I believe so.
Yeah, and it says proposed storage 3,548 cubic feet. So it looks to me like it's within the bounds of what you would accept, but just barely. I mean, it's not like it's much over. I mean, I'm just, there was a request that we look closely at the facts and look at the findings and whether there's actually a support that this is a community benefit. And at least for this one, it looks like it was adequate, but it looks to, a layperson like it was just barely within what was required. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't.
I mean, you don't?
No, I don't. Yeah, they're meeting the requirements.
Yeah,
They're meeting
and the other requirement
engineering's
was,
expectations for
I
stormwater
don't really
management.
even understand what these stand for, but peak storage, 0.08, I guess it's acre feet, and proposed storage, 0.081 acre feet. So again, just barely more than what would have been required. And I only raised this because this was one of the community benefits you asserted, but just looking at these numbers, it doesn't really jump out at you. So maybe you could explain it.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Mike Anderson from Hager Engineering. I wrote the report you're referring to. So to answer your question, the site does conform to the standards that the village enforces. In terms of the benefit to the property, it's that right now the property has no stormwater management at all. The property sheds off uncontrolled to the west and into the north. The benefit provided is meeting the village's code to provide the storage to provide relief to the existing stormwater system that exists on Wilmette. One of the benefits that the code specifically speaks to is using green infrastructure to accomplish that. And so that's one of the things we've elected to do. There are different ways of providing stormwater management. We're proposing a bioswale to provide that infiltration. That's something your code asks for as a optional item to use green infrastructure. And so that is something that we've elected to do.
So there was a statement, I guess maybe it was incorrect, that there would be no foliage or bioswale. You're saying that was incorrect.
The site has...
Because I was reading that and saying, well, you say you have the bioswale, you must have green infrastructure.
The site has over 25% landscaped area.
Yeah.
So right now the site is over 80%. It's going to be over, right now the site is over 80% impervious. And that's, parking lot and buildings.
So what you're really saying is, I mean, it just strikes me as a little bit of a stretch to say it's a community benefit to just meet the standards for any development would have to meet it. Is that a community benefit just to meet what the minimum zoning standard would be? But I gather what you're saying is one thing you're doing is meeting it in a way that comports more with the environmental objectives of the village?
Correct.
Yeah. So it's not the amount that's higher, it's the way you're accomplishing meeting this goal.
Yeah, that's correct.
Do I understand it correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I simply wanted to understand your report. It wasn't, it's a little Greek to me, to be honest.
It's technical, yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Question? Nothing to do with stormwater, no. Mr. Koenig, just, is there any history that your organization has or similar organizations in terms of expected turnover rate of residents for this this development? You know, how long do residents typically stay in a unit, and what kind of turnover can you expect?
Sure. So with this being a new development versus sort of existing developments, there's definitely a different pattern. So with a new development, what we have found is that when the tenants move in, they love their home, they know the community, this is where their support systems are, they tend to stay with us for a long time. We have an annual renewal process. We work with tenants on an annual basis to renew their lease. We do all of the checks that we do, recertifying them every single year. So we have a track record with tenants staying for a long period of time in developments like this.
So in the recertification process, then some of the things would go on would be, like if income increased, they would not be recertified, for instance, or...
So there's a cutoff limit. So we hope that people's incomes increase, and their incomes increase, and there's a technical level at which once they reach 140% of their median income, then we still don't evict them, but we change how they're incentivized to pay their rent. Their rent amount goes up significantly. We want them to move on. We want them to gain other types of housing so we can make that unit available to someone else. So we don't disqualify them based on their income creeping up. There's a point technically at which we disincentivize them to stay and want somebody else to be able to move into that unit.
I see. And then my last question has to do with expected project completion time. So, at a go forward, how long do you expect the development to take place?
So
it's probably in this packet, and I just missed it.
That's a good question. We don't anticipate starting anytime soon. If it is approved by the village, we still need to put together the financing package. In order to get the financing, we have to have the zoning in place, and so that process is through the state agency. Most of the funding comes through the Illinois Housing Development Authority. They have a specific process on providing those funds, making those funds available. So it would be at least another year and a half before we'd be able to get that financing put in place. And then once the construction happens, it happens very quickly. It's a typical construction process. Construction would maybe take 8, 10, 12 months, depending on the contractor, and then construction be completed and tenants be ready to move in the day the project was finished.
Right. It's helpful. Thank you.
Richard, Madam Chair, I recognize that we're not necessarily opining on the operations, but there were a number of questions. So I just wanted to ask a couple for the benefit of the commenters. On the question of screening, resident screening. Can you give an overview, just sort of what the basic screening process is and how it relates to recent criminal activity or things like that?
Sure. So the screening process for selecting tenants is dictated by a document called the Tenant Selection Plan, and that document has been provided on our website, on the village's website. We provide that document for this property. It's provided through the Illinois Housing Development Authority, so there are standard sets of procedures, and we have a little bit of flexibility on some of the basic characteristics based on the unit mix, but essentially the process is laid out in that document. So anything that I tell you, the document dictates exactly what that process is. In general, the process is that we create a waiting list, and this project would have a brand new waiting list created from scratch. We're not using existing waiting lists. We're not allowed to. The waiting list of the building would be marketed specifically for this development. We would get a whole new list of residents. Once we start reviewing those residents from the top of the waiting list. The screening process includes doing background checks, doing a credit check on all the adult residents who would be living in the unit. And so that's the screening process, is to find out what people's credit history and what their previous criminal background history might be. Based on those standards, we recognize that not everyone's going to have a perfect credit history, but it matters what the credit problems are. So we have some leeway in deciding what potential credit issues may come up. On the criminal history, there are specific guidelines within the tenant selection plan that say we are not allowed to select tenants that are sex offenders. We're not allowed to have tenants that have a recent felony conviction. So those specific groups are specifically excluded, and we are allowed to not select them through the selection process. Once someone goes through that initial screening process, then we certify their income, make sure they income qualify, that they don't have too much income, that they have enough income to afford the rent, and then decide whether or not they would be a good resident to live in the building.
And then that's recertified on an annual basis?
That's correct. So that's done initially, and then on an annual basis, their income is recertified at the time of the lease signed.
Another question. I think that, clarify for me, but I believe maybe there was some confusion about that related to the discussion of family housing versus senior housing. Is it correct that the family housing isn't really speaking to whether the units are 1 or 2 bedrooms, but that they're not for senior housing, that it's not designated for seniors? Is that the right way?
Correct. The term of art in the industry is family housing when it's generally open to anyone. If it's specifically limited to persons 62 and older, it's designated as senior housing. In general, family housing is sort of everything else. It can include seniors, but it's not limited to seniors under that senior category. So the family housing can include a single person, nuclear family. It can include people over 62. It can include a large range of people. It's sort of just the term of art that it's everybody else.
So even a studio apartment would be family housing?
Correct.
Okay. And then the last thing I want to ask about is the management operations. How often then? So you said you're likely to hire an additional manager if this building were to come online, and how often would you expect there to be some combination of manager maintenance on site?
Sure. So we're anticipating growth, and so we are going to be hiring another manager soon. This would be within that portfolio of growth, and so we'd be hoping to hire someone who would take on this building and several others, or reconfigure the properties, the unit configuration we have now, who's managing what. As far as presence on site, between a property manager coming around to the building to work with tenants to recertify their income, to redo their lease, to visit with tenants on a regular basis, so we're familiar with the residents, we know who our residents are. Maintenance personnel, whether they're cleaning or fixing things or shoveling or doing the yard. We're guesstimating that based on this building and based on the other properties that we have, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of on average of maybe 20 hours a week is what we're sort of guesstimating for this. It's simply not cost effective to have a 16-unit building, and some people are proposing less units with an on-site property manager. It's just not possible. We will have a significant presence at the building. We'll be at the building and making sure that our presence is known, but that's sort of the amount of time that we're going to be at the building, spend at the building. I'll spend time at the building. Our property asset management director, our property manager will spend time there. There will be a presence at the building, and the other piece of that is you know who to call. It's not an absentee landlord. It's not an absentee property manager. We're the organization doing the property management. You know where to find us, and you know how to get a hold of us. And so it's a known quantity who would contact you if there are issues that come up.
Thank you.
So I gather this is a project that's on the smaller size in your portfolio?
It's on the smaller size for most affordable housing.
Yeah.
It's a very small project for the type of financing that we're trying to put together. Most for-profit affordable housing developers wouldn't do a project this small because of the brain damage involved in putting together a project, all the paperwork that's involved. Whether it's 16 units or 160 units, it's the same amount of paperwork, same amount of going through the process. So for us, it is fairly average for our portfolio. We have single homes, duplexes, 4 flats. We have 12-unit buildings. We have a 48-unit building, and we manage a 100-unit building. So it's the new buildings that we're creating, this is about the size of the properties. We have a very similar building located over in Arlington Heights that we just recently got funded for, approved for. That'll be 16 units. And that one will probably start construction this summer. We recently completed a 13-unit building over in Glenview. We have another building in process that's 62 units. So there's sort of, the average is sort of all over the ballpark, but there's sort of a process of getting through all the pieces.
Can you say whether you tend to have more or fewer problems with these smaller projects? I mean, it strikes me that this is totally different than a 10-story public housing project. It's rather, small in size. It may be large for the lot, but it's a small project.
Right. Public housing projects were 3,000 to 4,000 units in a development. That's sort of not fair to compare a 16-unit development and say that similar types of problems are going to occur there.
Yeah.
As far as this type of project, it is a smaller property, which means it's hard to have a property manager on site, but it also means there are fewer people and fewer types of issues that would come up there.
So, I mean, if there were an issue in operations or, there was some need to repair, I see that there's a deferred developer fee of $143,000. Are there any circumstances under which you'd contribute that to the project rather than take it?
So the deferred developer fee is a requirement of the state under the financing mechanism. So essentially, there's a mathematical reason under the low-income housing tax credit program to include the entire fee. Actually, if you want to know closer to what we would get, you would subtract that deferred fee from the actual fee, and that's the incentive fee for a developer, us or anybody else, to do affordable housing. So that amount is already reduced and eliminated and based on a cash flow long-term basis.
So you're paying it over time.
So that comes in over the long haul, correct. So there's some fee that comes, a small amount comes in when we start the project to get it going. There's a large amount of that fee that's deferred until the project is built and up and completed and running, so that if there are any cost overruns, that fee is the first thing that, if we misestimate how much something costs, that's the first place that any of those cost overruns come out of, so that the funder won't let that even go out until the building is up and built and running. So there's a shorter-term deferral on that.
Okay.
The longer-term deferral is much, much longer. The other money that's set aside specifically to cover long-term costs are those reserves. So as upfront, there's a capitalized reserve. So we're capitalizing money that's set aside in a reserve specifically to do repairs, specifically to cover some of the cost, and that money continues to be increased and replenished on an operating basis on a year-to-year basis. So there's that $12,400 up front that's capitalized and set aside as soon as we're done with the project, and then that $6,000, I think it's $6,400 that's continually put aside on an annual basis, year after year after year, required to be set aside by our funder, so that amount grows, so that when things break down, when things eventually need to be repaired, there's an anticipated amount that money is there and is available to cover the cost of those repairs.
Mr. Koenig, if you're building reserves in that fashion, can you address why HODC needed to approach Evanston, for example, for funding to make what appeared to me to be major repairs on existing buildings?
So some of the repairs, the money we got from Evanston for repairs, we did the security cameras and the bathrooms and those in that building. Those were funds that the city had encouraged us to do those things for the building, and they offered to make those funds available. So we would be foolish not to take advantage of those.
I'm not referring to that. I'm referring, it sounded like there were major rehab types of projects of units.
The other two buildings, so the Callan building and the Jackson building, were mentioned as also, we received funding from the city of Evanston to do those repairs. With the Callan building, we had not used any funds at all from the city when we originally bought the building in 2000. After it was very minor fixes that we did with that building. We've been operating it for a number of years, and I got to the point where after operating it for just about 15 years, it became run down. The rents were very low. It wasn't there. We didn't go through this whole process of funding and reserves being set aside. The process of taking over an existing building was very different than starting a new building from scratch. Taking over a building without any subsidized funding, without any established. There was no pre-development. There was no developer fee. There were no reserves set aside. It's really comparing apples and oranges. It was an existing building. We bought it. We took it over and then just started running it. It got to the point where it simply needed more repairs, and we had cash available to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one question. You mentioned that in Glenview you're building a 13-unit, right?
Correct.
How does that compare to this one in terms of square footage, just everything, number of two-bedroom, one-bedroom?
Right. So that building has a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. It has 8 1s, 2 2s, and 3 3s. It is set up as two separate buildings, so there's an 8-unit component and a 5-unit component. The site layout is very different. It's got a large parking area. It was on a piece of land that was foreclosed by the bank, and so the village had already approved a townhome development on that site. And the village said as long as we adopt the townhome footprint, we're allowed to move forward with the project. So the design is more of a townhome style design because that was what had been approved by the village. That building also has a tenant population that is restricted to persons with some type of disability. So it's as permanent supportive housing. It's somebody in the household, an adult in the household has to have some sort of disability, whether it's physical, mental, developmental, it's some type of disability. So it's sort of a different funding model, different model for running that building.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Is this appropriate time for?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the proposed development at 1925 Wilmette in conformance with the application that we've received?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, no, I'm sorry, discussion.
Discussion.
My apologies.
I'm conflicted. I'm really conflicted. I think, at the risk of making a speech here, I think a lot of times we try to fix something and we really ignore the other, whatever that's going to backfire. I'm all for low-income housing. I think it's a great idea. I think we need to have more. My issue is that we tend to put people in one spot, whether they're rich, whether they're poor, whether they are, Muslim like me, or whether, we put them in one spot, and that usually backfires. That's the one issue I have. But again, I'm not the one who writes the laws. I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. My objection would be from that perspective, that if you respect people enough to mix everybody without looking at them at their color and their religion and their income, then things will work out. Then they will become part of the community. But if you put everybody with low income in one spot, they are going to become low income. So with that said, specifically about this project, I have an issue with density. It's a small site, and I think we're cramping too many units, too many people. The traffic in that area is really bad. Whether 16 units is going to affect it, make it a lot worse, I know it's not going to make it better. So I would like, and I know this has been going on. I'm the new kid on the block here. This has been going on for 2-3 years. But I would like for you to go back and consider somehow reducing the numbers. People, if you're building in a community, regardless of why people don't like it, there has to be some respect given to those people. You have to listen to why they don't like it, because they're going to have to live with the consequences of what we're doing. And frankly, again, you can come and build in my neighborhood. I would be the first one to say, great, do it. But there are people in that neighborhood who are saying no. For whatever reason, and I think most of them are not really against low-income housing. They have concerns about how this is being, going forward. And with all due respect, I agree that a lot of people who are saying low-income housing is great are just like me. They don't live next door to it. So we need to be cognizant of that. We need to respect the people, how they feel about it, and try to work through it, because you're going to have to deal with those neighbors for the 30 years you're there.
Can I ask council to just give some clarity on on the parameters for our consideration?
Right. We would want to consider this as if it was any other type of housing unit and not take into the affordable housing or the low-income impact of it. Under the Fair Housing Act and Federal Fair Housing Act, as well as our own ordinances, as I stated in the beginning of this meeting, really should not be considered. The density comment you made is one that should be well taken, but however, whether or not the individuals that are going to be living there are of any socioeconomic should not be something that this commission should take into account.
And that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm not saying that the economics of it are the issue. That's not what I'm talking. I'm saying that people, if in any kind of development, you have to. In reality, is that you're going to live with the people that you're going to be living with. So that's all I'm saying. And where I'm coming from, I think my biggest problem is the density and the traffic. I would like to see less units. That would consider, I think that would buy a lot of goodwill. So my, I guess if we're taking votes here, mine would be no.
I'd like to speak in favor of the proposal. I work for a development company, manage lots of property, and I am not troubled in the least by the density or the number of units. This is a small number of units in the scheme of things. The number of the effect on traffic. We heard from the experts who've done the study. I think that just simple math tells you that even if the entire unit, the entire property is full of 15, 20 cars, that unless every single one is lined up to go out on the street at the same moment, is going to be a nominal impact. I drive that route twice every morning to take a kid to Highcrest and a kid to Wilmette Junior High, right down Wilmette Avenue. And I guess I'm maybe I lived in Chicago too long, but I'm not noticing the traffic impact that people are raising as being this huge concern. Another thing I would speak to with respect to the parking is that in property management, there's absolutely a clear trend towards fewer cars at every income level. The rise of the Uber and the Lyft has made a huge change, and the impact is dramatic on a year-to-year basis, where the number of cars that we're seeing at my company's properties is falling in 5%, 6%, 7% a year. And underutilized parking is more of a problem than having sufficient amount of parking. And lastly, I would speak to the quality of the developer here, Mr. Koenig, an organization that has 30 years history, an individual who has been doing this development and management for over 20 years, doing it work that he could make a lot more money doing market rate development that would be a lot less work and a lot more financially rewarding. But I'm inspired by his commitment to the project and to trying to do something in Wilmette that's been part of our charter for a long time and has not been successfully done. And so I, again, want to speak in favor of the project.
Yes, I was one of those people who was here 2 years ago, along with Mr. Adler and our chair and Mr. Koenig, and probably a lot of you, too. And at the time, there were many comments made. There was, I remember, for example, there was quite a lot of comments about, wouldn't it be better if this project was more suitable for families? Because that would be something that would really help facilitate integrating the project into the neighborhood. Because the kids, as was mentioned, they would go to school. Because families would tend to mesh into Wilmette better. And I was struck that they tried, I think, as much as they could within their financial constraints to respond to that. They have responded to the community. And I think, actually, there are some defects in the whole low-income housing tax credit problem. One of the problems is, they got a lot of money up front, and that it has hard money to keep supporting it over time. That's just intrinsic to the program. But I have a lot of and I don't think we're going to get a low-income housing tax project with a better developer than someone who has a long-term commitment to the community. Because we know it's a problem with these types of projects that a lot of the developers do walk away. And I agree with you, actually, that I can't see why anyone who is interested in making a lot of money rather than serving the community would be in the business of doing these low-income housing tax projects for 13 or 12 or 16 unit projects that require all this aggravation, honestly. So I think, they have made quite an extraordinary effort to try. It's an imperfect program. Nothing is ever going to be perfect, but basically they're getting pretty much all the funding from the feds through the low-income housing tax credit, some of it from the state, and it's not costing Wilmette anything. Not a perfect program, but this is as good as we're going to get. So that's my view of it, and that's why I'm in favor of it.
Just short, Council, your guidance in terms of the limited scope of this commission, solidified. There's been, a lot that I won't repeat tonight, but based on your guidance, I come in favor of this proposal as well. I think it's hard. I think that there's many arguments on both sides, but in terms of my role as a commissioner on this, I'm taking to heart your guidance in terms of the limited scope, and I'm in favor of this.
And I will close by saying, Homa, you said you were conflicted. I feel frustrated. As a commission, we heard the Ford site proposal, and I think we had an opportunity as a village to insist on the 10 or 15% share of affordable housing in a development that is far better situated, located than the site being discussed this evening. And we were told by the developer that it was not possible, and we accepted that word, and I think we should maybe have been more forceful. Like Mr. Bailey, I'm heartened that HODC did, I think, take the community's feedback to heart when this first came to the commission in the fall of 2015. You have scaled down the proposal and you've restructured it. It was 10 studios, 10 one-bedrooms, and we're now 10 one-bedrooms and 6 two-bedrooms. There's been a lot of talk tonight about whether this is a family development or not, and I'd like to suggest that the definition of family is changing rapidly in our country. There are more families that have no children than families that have children, and that's a title change. That was not true when I was a child, for sure. I think this is a good site for affordable housing. I think the character and the scale of the development is in keeping with the general character along Ridge Road, and even the townhouses in Pin Oaks and across the street. And I will be voting in favor.
Call the roll.
Yes, please.
Mr. Bailey?
Aye.
Ms. Gamey?
Nay.
Mr. Head?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Chairman Urban?
Aye.
That's passes 4-1. And that's a recommendation to the village board. This will be going April 10th to the village board, and that's 7:30 in the evening.
Thank you all for attending this evening. Is there?
We got one more.
Odd man out.
Authorize.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can there be a motion to authorize the staff to prepare a report that I will sign?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for attending.
Total Info, News.